Mafia boss was mourning on Valentine's Eve until he saw her. He ordered, "Bring that girl to me." For 5 years, the Mafia boss spent every Valentine's Day at the same grave. He hadn't touched a woman, hadn't smiled, hadn't felt anything but cold revenge. Then he saw her. She was sitting alone at her own bachelorette party, not drinking, not dancing, not performing for anyone, just watching. Like she didn't belong there either. His offer was simple. Spend Valentine's Day with me. 24 hours, conversation, meals, just your presence. Nothing more. In return, $5 million. Her rules were simpler. She would bore him to death and leave by midnight. But before the 24 hours was over, neither of them would keep their rules. Conan Huxley, one of Chicago's wealthiest and most feared men, sat in the back of his Bentley, watching the city lights blur past the window. 39 years old, cold blue eyes, a face that made people look away before he had to make them. He glanced at his watch and felt his chest tighten when the date registered. February 13th, only hours until the anniversary he hated more than anything in this world. The car stopped outside his nightclub, Onyx, and a red Ferrari blocking the entrance caught his attention immediately. Dan stepped out to open his door while Fabio positioned himself alongside, and that's when Conan heard the voice cutting through the night air. 4 young men surrounded the Ferrari, drinking openly, laughing too loud. The one near the hood held a beer bottle like a trophy, his friends hanging on every word he said. "Come on, boys, let's find ourselves some girls tonight." He grinned at his audience. "I'm getting married next week. Can you imagine? The same woman for the rest of my life." He shuddered dramatically. "The thought alone is suffocating. Let's have some fun before the cage door closes." His friends howled with approval. Conan stepped out of the Bentley into the February cold, his expression flat as he walked toward the entrance. Dan and Fabio exchanged a glance behind him, the kind of look that said they both knew what date it was and what that meant for anyone stupid enough to cross their boss tonight. The loud one stumbled backward without looking and crashed into Conan's chest. Beer splashed across Italian wool. "Hey, watch where you're going." The kid barely looked up. "You bumped into me." Conan stopped. His eyes moved from the stain spreading across his coat to the face of the boy who had caused it. Fabio's hand drifted toward his jacket, and Dan held his breath. "Look at the road when you walk, young man." Conan's voice came out low and even. "And you can't stand outside my club with open drinks." The kid straightened, puffing up for his audience. "It was an accident, relax, and I'll do what I want. This is a free country." Fabio stepped forward, but Conan raised his hand slightly, and the big man froze. "Freedom and disrespect are not the same thing." Conan held the boy's gaze until he saw the first flicker of fear. "Move your car, now!" The kid opened his mouth to respond, and something in Conan's eyes made him close it again. His friends were already backing toward the Ferrari, their bravado evaporating into the cold night air. "Whatever, man." He tried to sound dismissive, but his voice cracked. "Wasn't a good club anyway." Conan was already walking toward the entrance, and the staff held the doors open with the nervous efficiency of people who had witnessed what happened when their boss was displeased. Behind him, the Ferrari's engine screamed to life and disappeared down the street. The doors closed behind them, and the club's music swallowed the silence. Fabio leaned toward Dan as they followed Conan through the VIP corridor. "You see that kid's face?" Fabio kept his voice low, eyes tracking their boss. 30 minutes until midnight. Valentine's Day. Dan nodded once. "You remember last year? The guy at the bar who bumped into him?" Fabio started up the stairs. 6 weeks learning to walk again. I told him to apologize. He laughed. Boss didn't think it was funny." Dan's jaw tightened. "So what's our play tonight?" Fabio spread his hands. "Keep everyone away from him. Woman approaches, redirect her. Man approaches, redirect him faster." He paused at the top of the stairs, watching Conan settle into his usual chair. "One wrong move from anyone, and this whole club becomes a crime scene." Dan rubbed the back of his neck. "Relax." Fabio pulled the small cross from under his shirt. kissed it, and tucked it back. Going to be a long night. Conan sat in the leather chair overlooking the club, scotch in hand, watching the chaos below without really seeing it. A bachelorette party had claimed the front VIP section, 6 or 7 women in pink sashes making enough noise to drown out the music. He almost looked away. Then he saw her. She sat slightly apart from the group, straight dark hair spilling over her shoulders, wearing a dress that didn't scream for attention. While her friends shrieked and posed and pulled at strangers, she watched the room with quiet eyes, scanning exits, noting faces, holding herself like someone who had learned to expect trouble. One of them grabbed her arm, trying to drag her toward the dance floor, and she smiled politely and slipped free with practiced ease. Conan leaned forward. She wasn't drinking, wasn't dancing, wasn't performing for anyone. In the middle of all that chaos, all that noise, she sat perfectly still, and somehow, impossibly, she was the only thing in the room he could see, like a star burning bright in a sky full of smoke. "This girl doesn't belong here," he murmured to himself. His chest tightened around the thought. Neither did he. Not tonight. Not anymore. He watched her for a while, the way she deflected attention without being rude, the way her eyes kept moving even when she smiled. Simple, elegant beauty. Nothing like the others who confused loud with fun and cheap with sexy. Something about her stillness in the middle of all that noise made him unable to look away. Half an hour passed. That's when the trouble started. 2 men in expensive suits had zeroed in on the bachelorette table, circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. Tasha was entertaining them, laughing too loud, but Conan's eyes stayed on the dark-haired woman. Her smile had turned into something harder, her posture shifting from relaxed to rigid as one of the men leaned too close. "Fabio." Conan set his glass down without looking away. "Handle those 2. Get them out quietly." His voice dropped lower. "And bring her to me, the one in the dark dress." Fabio's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he knew better than to question. He signaled Dan, and they moved toward the stairs. 25-year-old Stella Webster had grown bored of her own bachelorette party approximately half an hour after it started, and the man currently breathing vodka into her face was testing limits she didn't know she had. "Come on, beautiful." He leaned closer, his hand finding her shoulder uninvited. "Just 1 drink. What's the harm?" Stella fixed her large hazel eyes on him, her gaze hardening beneath long lashes. "The harm is that I've said no 3 times. Stella removed his hand with deliberate calm. "I'm not interested." Tasha waved her champagne glass from across the table. "Lighten up, Stell. It's your party. Have some fun for once." "My party. My bachelorette party." The words felt like a costume that didn't fit, like something she was wearing for everyone else's benefit. The man's hand returned to her shoulder, heavier this time. "See? Your friend gets it. 1 drink. I'm a nice guy." "Nice guys don't touch women who've asked them to stop." Stella's voice went flat, and something in her eyes made his smirk falter for half a second before the alcohol courage kicked back in. "Playing hard to get. I like that." His fingers tightened, and Stella was calculating exactly how much force it would take to break his wrist when a shadow fell across the table. The man was enormous. Shoulders like a refrigerator, hands that could crush skulls, a face that suggested he had done exactly that. He smiled pleasantly at the drunk, and somehow that made everything worse. "Time to leave." His voice was almost friendly. "Excuse me?" The drunk puffed up. "We're having a conversation here." "No?" The giant's hand closed around the back of his neck like a vice. "You're not." The second drunk tried to intervene and found himself face to face with another man, leaner but no less dangerous, who gripped his collar with casual efficiency. Within seconds, both of them were being escorted toward the exit like trash being taken out. Helen grabbed Stella's arm, her eyes wide. "What the hell was that?" "I have no idea." Stella watched the 2 men disappear into the crowd, her pulse still hammering from the confrontation that had almost happened. But whoever runs this place takes security seriously. The owner must be something else. Helen craned her neck toward the upper level, squinting through the dim lights. "Oh my God, Stella, look up there, the one staring this way, shoulders like an aircraft carrier, that perfectly tailored suit." She fanned herself dramatically. "Please tell me that's him, please." Stella let her gaze drift upward briefly, and her breath caught without permission. He sat in the shadows of the private lounge, but even from here she could feel the weight of his attention. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that found hers through the crowd like he'd been waiting for her to look. She forced herself to turn away, an uncomfortable heat spreading across her skin. She busied herself with her drink, refusing to look up again. "I don't care who he is. I just want this night to be over." Helen squeezed her hand. "Stella, are you okay? You've been off all night." The question hung between them, and Stella didn't know how to answer it honestly. 4 years with Neil, a ring on her finger, a wedding in 7 days. She was supposed to be excited. She was supposed to be happy. She was supposed to feel something other than this hollow dread. "I'm fine, Helen. Just tired." Before her friend could push further, the enormous man reappeared at their table, and this time his expression carried something almost resembling respect. "Miss," he inclined his head with surprising grace for someone his size, "the owner of this establishment, Mr. Huxley, would like a word with you upstairs. 5 minutes of your time." Helen's eyes went wide. "Mr. Huxley?" The man's attention stayed fixed on Stella. "He asked for you specifically, miss." "That's very kind." Stella kept her voice even, despite the strange flutter beneath her ribs. "Please thank him for handling those men. But if Mr. Huxley wants to speak with me, he can come down here himself. I don't follow strangers to private rooms." Something shifted in the big man's expression. Not offense, something warmer. "Mr. Huxley prefers privacy. And I prefer not being summoned." She held his gaze without flinching. "Tell him I said thank you and good night." The man studied her for a long moment, something like admiration flickering across his features. Then he nodded once and disappeared back up the stairs. Helen grabbed her shoulders the moment he was gone, shaking her slightly. "Stella, are you insane? Do you know what people say about the man who owns this club? He's supposed to be incredibly powerful, incredibly rich." She glanced up toward the VIP lounge and her breath caught. "And from what I'm seeing, incredibly hot. And he wants to talk to you." Stella raised her left hand, wiggling her ring finger. The diamond caught the light. "And I'm incredibly engaged, Helen." "To Neil." Helen rolled her eyes. The name came out flat, loaded with years of unspoken opinions. Before Stella could respond, the second man appeared at their table, the leaner one with sharp eyes and a careful smile. "Miss Webster?" Stella's spine went rigid. "How do you know my name?" "Mr. Huxley is thorough." He lowered his voice, leaning closer. "I should mention that the boss isn't accustomed to being refused, especially not tonight." Stella's chin lifted, a spark of defiance cutting through her exhaustion. "Then, tonight will be educational for him." The man's smile widened slightly. "Perhaps. But between us, miss, it's nearly midnight. Valentine's Day." Something flickered behind his eyes. "The boss has history with this date, the kind that makes him unpredictable. I'd consider it a personal favor if you'd give him 5 minutes. Just 5. Stella looked at Helen, who was practically vibrating, then back at the man whose expression held genuine concern beneath the professional polish. 5 minutes, she stood, smoothing her dress. "And then I'm gone." The upstairs lounge was another world entirely. Dark leather, amber lighting, the kind of deliberate silence that made the chaos below feel like a distant memory. Stella climbed the final step and stopped. Conan Huxley rose slowly from his chair, and she understood immediately why people feared this man. He moved like something predatory wearing an expensive suit, all controlled power and patient danger. Tall, broad, a face that belonged on a warning sign. His eyes were pale blue, cold as a January morning, and when they found hers, Stella felt the impact somewhere deep in her chest. He didn't speak, just gestured with one hand toward the seat beside him. Stella walked past it and sat across from him instead. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of surprise followed by genuine amusement. He settled back into his chair, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Thank you for coming. His voice was low and smooth, the kind of voice that made people lean closer without realizing. May I know your first name, Miss Webster? Stella kept her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. You run a good establishment. It's nice that women can feel safe here. Thank you for that. She paused, letting the words settle. But if you had something to say to me, you could have come downstairs yourself. I don't understand why you expected me to come to you. His interest sharpened visibly, something warming in those cold eyes as he studied her. When he smiled, it transformed his face into something almost handsome. I'm Conan Huxley, he leaned forward slightly, and I asked you here because I wanted to speak with you privately. Privately? Stella tilted her head. What could you possibly have to discuss with me in private? Conan set his glass on the table and shifted his body toward her, closing the distance without leaving his chair. You want me to get straight to the point? Fine. He glanced at his watch. Tomorrow, or technically today, since it's just past midnight, February 14th. I want you to spend the day with me. Stella laughed before she could stop herself. Excuse me? It's simple. His eyes held hers without wavering. Conversation, breakfast, lunch, dinner, the whole day. With me. You can't be serious. She shook her head slowly. Why would I do that? I don't even know you. Conan leaned closer, his voice dropping. $5 million. For February 14th only. The number hung in the air between them, and Stella felt her composure slip for just a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, straightening her spine. Mr. Huxley, her voice came out cool and even. I'm not the kind of woman you seem to think I am. There's an entire club full of women downstairs. Why would you make this offer to me? Do I look like I'm inviting this kind of attention? Conan leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left her face. The opposite, actually. That's exactly why I chose you. His voice softened slightly. You're different from everyone else here. That caught my interest. Stella stood abruptly. This is my bachelorette party. I'm engaged. I'm getting married in 1 week. Conan lifted his chin and nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he already suspected. To Neil. She froze. You know Neil? Unfortunately. Something cold passed across his features. We met. Tonight. Stella felt heat rise to her face, anger replacing shock. Mr. Huxley, you've crossed a line. I thought this was a safe place, but clearly I was wrong. Her voice shook slightly. I don't know what your problem is with Valentine's Day, but you're obviously desperate. Honestly, I feel sorry for you. Near the door, Fabio made a strangled sound and bit down on his fist. Dan exhaled slowly through his teeth. We're dead. Conan rose from his chair, and even standing across from her anger, he seemed more intrigued than offended. It was a pleasure meeting you. His voice was calm, almost gentle. And my offer stands until 9 a.m. Stella stared at him in disbelief, then shook her head and walked toward the stairs without another word. Conan watched her descend, the dark hair catching the light, the rigid set of her shoulders, the absolute refusal to look back. His eyes never left her until she disappeared into the crowd below. Dan. His voice was soft, but Dan appeared instantly at his shoulder. Sir? Dan's posture shifted to attention, his notepad already in hand. Conan didn't look at him, his eyes still fixed on the crowd below. Her name? Dan flipped through his notes, though they both knew he'd already memorized everything. Stella Webster, sir. 25. Social worker. He hesitated, something almost like sympathy crossing his features. Getting married next week to Neil Ashford. Conan's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. The boy who blocked my door. The one with more car than class. Dan nodded once. Yes, sir. He was quiet for a long moment, still staring at the spot where she had vanished. Then he laughed, low and humorless, and the sound made both men shift uncomfortably. Stella. He said the name like he was tasting it. Interesting. He buttoned his jacket and moved toward the stairs. Sir? Fabio stepped forward. Where are you going? but Conan Huxley was already gone. Helen grabbed Stella the moment she reached the bottom of the stairs, her fingers digging into her friend's arm with barely contained curiosity. What happened? What did he want? Stella was still shaking her head, still trying to process what had just occurred in that private lounge. He's unbelievable. He offered me money. Helen's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O. To sleep with him? Stella let out a frustrated breath, running her hands through her hair. No, I don't know. He said conversation, meals, spending the day together. She pressed her fingers to her temples like she was trying to hold her thoughts in place. $5 million to spend Valentine's Day with him. Who does that? Helen let out a low whistle, her gaze drifting back toward the upper level with something that looked dangerously like admiration. What? 5 million? You can't be serious, Stell. Honestly, I'd do it for free. Did you see that man? Those shoulders, that jaw? Helen, stop! Stella grabbed her purse from the table, her movements sharp with agitation. Let's go. I don't want to be here anymore. She gathered the other girls, made hurried excuses about being tired, and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Outside, the February air hit her like a slap. She checked her phone, almost midnight. 3 calls to Neil, all unanswered. Her message from 10 minutes ago still showed unread. Outside. Come get me. She scanned the street for his car, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold, and that's when the club doors opened behind her. Conan Huxley stepped out, Fabio and Dan flanking him like shadows. His eyes found hers immediately, held for a moment, then moved past her toward the black Bentley waiting at the curb. Before anyone could speak, the roar of an engine split the night. The red Ferrari screeched to a stop in front of the club, and Neil stumbled out, looking like he'd been dragged through a bachelor party of his own. His shirt was untucked, his hair was a mess, and even from 10 feet away Stella could see the lipstick smeared across his collar. Babe! He spread his arms wide, grinning like nothing was wrong. There you are! Let's go. Stella felt something cold settle in her stomach. Neil, what happened to you? Nothing. He lurched toward her, reaching for her face. Come on, give me a kiss. She stepped back, her nose wrinkling. You reek of alcohol. And what is that on your collar? Don't be dramatic. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in harder than necessary. We had some fun. It's my last week of freedom, right? Now get in the car. I'm not getting in a car with you driving like this. Neil's face darkened. His grip on her arm tightened until pain shot up to her shoulder. You're embarrassing me. He yanked her closer. Get in the car. Stella tried to pull free. Neil, you're hurting me. Near the Bentley, Fabio's hand drifted toward his jacket. He leaned toward Dan, his voice barely a whisper. It's officially the 14th. Dan watched the scene unfold. Happy Valentine's. Fabio crossed himself. Conan was already moving, his footsteps silent on the concrete, his face carved from something colder than stone. Let go of her arm. The voice came from behind Neil, quiet and flat, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Neil spun around, and his face twisted when he recognized the man from earlier. You again. He didn't release Stella's arm. Mind your own business, man. This is between me and my fiancée. Conan stopped 3 feet away, hands loose at his sides, his posture deceptively relaxed. She said you're hurting her. She said she doesn't want to get in your car. His pale eyes moved to Neil's fingers, still digging into Stella's arm. Let go. Neil's chest puffed up, alcohol and wounded pride making him stupid. Who the hell do you think you are? Some kind of morality police? You think you're better than me, you arrogant prick? Stella twisted free and stepped between them, her palm pressing against Conan's chest before she could think better of it. The heat of him burned through the fabric of his suit. Mr. Huxley, this doesn't concern you. Please stay out of it. Conan looked down at her hand on his chest, then back at Neil. He didn't move, didn't blink. 1 week. His voice was soft, almost conversational, but something in it made the hair on Stella's arms stand up. You're marrying this woman in 1 week, and this is how you treat her. Neil's laugh came out high and wild, cracking at the edges. I'll treat her however I want. She's mine. Something shifted in Conan's expression. Not anger. Something colder. Something that made Stella step back without meaning to. He moved so fast Stella barely saw it. One hand closed around Neil's wrist, twisted once with surgical precision, and Neil's grip spasmed open as a strangled yelp escaped his throat. When a woman says no, she means no. Conan's face remained completely neutral as he bent Neil's wrist to an angle that looked agonizing. She said she doesn't want to get in your car. That means she doesn't want to get in your car. He released him with a shove that sent Neil stumbling backward. Now get lost. The girl isn't going with you. Neil cradled his wrist, his face purple with humiliation. You're insane. Stella, this guy is crazy. He backed toward the Ferrari, yanking the door open. You're not coming with me? Call yourself an Uber. Don't put me in a position to fight this lunatic. The door slammed. The engine roared. Neil! Stella shouted after him. But the Ferrari was already gone, leaving nothing but tire marks and silence. Conan turned to Stella, his hand reaching for her arm with the casual certainty of a man who expected to be obeyed. You're coming with me. She yanked back before he could touch her, her heel catching on a crack in the sidewalk. Excuse me, I'm not going anywhere with you. Helen rushed forward, inserting herself between them like a small, furious shield. If you're taking her somewhere, I'm coming too. Conan's gaze shifted to Helen for exactly 1 second before dismissing her entirely. His eyes returned to Stella. No, just her. Stella's hands curled into fists at her sides, her voice shaking with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. I already told you no upstairs, and I'm telling you no again. She stepped closer, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. How is what you're doing any different from what Neil just did? Conan studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind those blue eyes. Then he stepped forward, and before Stella could process what was happening, one arm slid behind her back, the other swept beneath her knees, and the ground disappeared. She gasped, hands flying to his shoulders for balance. His warmth seeped through the fabric of his coat, and his scent, amber and tobacco, wrapped around her. What do you think you're doing? She whispered. You're shivering. His blue gaze held hers as he carried her toward the Bentley. And those heels weren't made for standing in the cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should protest. She should demand he put her down. But his arms felt like safety, and she was so tired of standing on her own. By the time her brain caught up, she was already in the back seat, and he was sliding in beside her. Mr. Huxley. She stared at him in disbelief. I can't believe you just did that. How many ways do I need to say no? Conan settled back against the leather as the car began to move, his expression unreadable. The difference between me and your fiancé? He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the Bentley, his pale eyes held something she couldn't name. I know what's best for you, what's safe for you. Better than that useless man you're about to marry. The car glided through Chicago's empty streets, and Stella pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She should be screaming, she should be fighting, she should be terrified. But as she stared at the man sitting beside her, this stranger who had just upended her entire life in the space of a single night, she realized that terror wasn't the only thing coursing through her veins. There was something else, something that felt dangerously like anticipation. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what he wanted. She didn't know anything anymore. And somehow, that was the most terrifying part of all. The Bentley cut through Chicago's empty streets. Dan's eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror. Beside him, Fabio watched the side mirror, stealing glances at the two figures in the back. Conan pressed a button. The privacy partition rose, sealing them off. Fabio waited until the glass locked into place, then leaned toward Dan. 5 years. His voice dropped low. 5 years working for the boss, and this is the first time... technically it's February 14th now. What do you think he's going to do with her? Dan's mouth twitched. He won't hurt her. Boss is a gentleman. Fabio turned to stare at him. A gentleman who just kidnapped a woman. Elegantly, but still. The annual whispering of violence kind of gentleman. Dan kept his eyes on the road, but his knuckles had gone white on the wheel. In the back, Stella kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching the city blur past. She could feel him watching her, that same unsettling attention from the club, but she refused to turn. She caught his reflection in the glass, that faint curve at the corner of his mouth, like her silence was entertainment. Stella had never been good at silence when she was cornered. "I assume you're taking me home." She kept her voice steady. "Though you haven't asked for my address." Conan's voice cut through the silence. "Are you really going to marry that idiot?" She turned. "Excuse me?" "Neil Ashford." He said the name like it left a bad taste. "You're sensible, polite, attractive, logical. And you're marrying that?" Stella held his gaze, then let a slow, mocking smile spread across her face. "So, marrying a Mafia boss would be more logical, Mr. Huxley?" The corner of his mouth curved slightly. "Who told you I'm a Mafia boss?" Stella gestured around the Bentley's interior, then toward the window. "This car, a nightclub. Two men who looked like they bench-press refrigerators for fun." She tilted her head. "What should I call your career, then?" This time, Conan actually smiled and let the silence speak for itself. In front, Fabio nearly choked. His ear was pressed to the partition, eyes wide. She called him Mafia. Dan, she called him Mafia to his face. "We're done." Dan's grip tightened on the wheel. If he doesn't yell at her in 10 seconds, he's in love. Fabio started counting. 1, 2, 3. In the back, Conan's expression didn't change. "I'm just asking for one day, 24 hours, conversations, meals, getting to know someone new." He tilted his head. "I'm aware I'm not usually this civilized. I'm trying to have a conversation with you, convince you. In the past, I've handled things differently." Stella let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, I'm impressed. Personal development seminars, from Mafia boss to gentleman?" Conan laughed, real, warm. It caught her off guard. "You're funny, Stella. I like that." The smile stayed. "Though the word is maturity." Then the warmth vanished. His hand closed around her wrist, not painful but immovable. "I'm not known for patience. We're going to my home. Until midnight tomorrow. You're mine." Stella's pulse jumped against his fingers. "Are you kidnapping me?" "No. I'm hosting you." His grip didn't ease. "Whether you want to be hosted or not." She met his gaze directly. "I won't be sharing your bed, no matter how elegant the kidnapping was." Conan raised an eyebrow, head tilting with something like amusement. "One day with me, and that's what your mind jumps to first?" Heat flooded her face. She turned toward the window, jaw tight. "It's what all men think about first." Conan didn't respond. His gaze traveled over her slowly, the rigid spine, the fists in her lap, the stubborn jaw reflected in glass. That's when he noticed them, pale marks scattered across her forearms and hands. Against her skin, they looked like moonlight that had soaked in and refused to fade. Subtle, almost invisible unless you were looking. Stella caught his gaze in the reflection. Her hands moved quickly, tucking beneath her thighs. Conan said nothing, but he noticed. The iron gates swung open. The driveway wound through manicured hedges toward a mansion that rose 3 stories high, windows glowing warm against the February dark. Stella stared, something bitter twisting in her chest. "You really are filthy rich, Huxley. Your money and your power. They make you bold." The thought burned through her before she could stop it. The car stopped. Conan straightened his cuffs, eyes still on her. Fabio opened Conan's door first, then moved toward Stella's side. Conan stopped him with a raised hand. He circled the car and opened her door himself. Stella shot him a glare as she stepped out. But in that moment, her heel betrayed her. Gravel slipped, ankle twisted, and she was falling. He caught her before she could gasp. 1 second air, the next, his chest, his hands, his scent. Amber and tobacco, layered with something woody underneath. The kind of cologne that didn't announce itself, it waited until you were close enough to be trapped by it. Something low in her stomach tightened. She lifted her chin to tell him to let go, and their eyes met. Cold blue, she realized. Not the cold grey she'd expected. And beneath the arrogance, beneath the entitlement she'd seen all night, there was something else. Depth. Warmth. Like a fire burning behind frosted glass. Stella swallowed hard and stepped back. Conan's hands dropped to his sides, but that faint smile remained. The entrance hall swallowed them whole. Marble floors stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling. Paintings lined the walls. Originals, Stella guessed, not prints. A bronze sculpture stood in an alcove, catching the light from a crystal chandelier. "You don't need to be afraid." Conan's voice echoed softly in the space. "I'll never hurt you. Make yourself comfortable." A woman in a crisp uniform appeared from a side corridor, her eyes widening when she saw Stella. "Mr. Huxley." She fumbled over the words. "You have a guest?" Conan's tone remained even. "Yes, Lucy. A special guest. She'll be staying tonight and tomorrow. Please prepare the large guest room." Lucy nodded, still visibly confused. As she turned to leave, her eyes met Fabio's. Fabio raised his eyebrows and mouthed silently, "He's okay." Lucy didn't look convinced. The living room opened onto a wall of windows and a fireplace large enough to stand in. Flames crackled behind an iron grate, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and Persian rugs. But it was the library that caught Stella's attention. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined an entire wall, packed with books that looked actually read, spines cracked, pages worn. She drifted toward them without thinking, her fingers trailing across the titles. Dostoevsky, Erich Fromm, Machiavelli, Anthony Bourdain. A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. "Who knew the personal development joke would actually land?" she murmured, then added louder, trailing her fingers along the spines. "So you like to read? That's rare these days, especially in men." Conan appeared beside her, holding 2 crystal glasses of amber liquid. "Something to warm you up." Stella took it, eyeing the contents with suspicion. She took a small sip and immediately coughed as smoke and peat burned down her throat. Conan watched her with amusement. "Lagavulin, 16 years old. The smoky taste is an acquired one." He swirled his own glass. "It's not like other drinks. You don't throw it back. You savor it." His eyes held hers. "Like you." Heat crept up her neck. She looked away, annoyed at how easily he'd gotten under her skin. This man knows exactly how to work a woman, she thought, and he's not even trying to hide it. Stella set down her glass. "I need to call Neil." She pulled her phone from her clutch. Conan watched her, glass in hand. "May I?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Conan gestured toward the window. "Of course." She dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, 6. Stella swallowed, the sound loud in her own ears. Whenever I need him, he vanishes. How can he not answer at a moment like this? The thought clawed at her chest. Finally, a click. "Stella, how are you? Where are you?" "Neil." She kept her voice flat, forcing the tremor down. "I'm at Mr. Huxley's house." The line went quiet for a moment. Then his voice turned sharp, accusing. "You threw yourself at that man's place already, Stella." Something hot flared behind her ribs. "Neil, you were the one who left me there and ran." She pressed the phone harder against her ear. "Did you forget?" Conan moved to the fireplace, his back to her. He swirled his whiskey, took a slow sip. But she could feel his attention like a hand on her spine. "Babe, if I'd stayed, I would have had to fight the guy. Gotten myself into trouble." Neil's voice shifted to that wheedling tone she knew too well. "You wouldn't want that days before the wedding, right?" Stella closed her eyes and breathed through her nose. "Don't scream. Don't scream." She forced herself to exhale slowly. "Fine, Neil. Now I need you to listen carefully." She turned toward the window, lowering her voice. Mr. Huxley has a request. He wants me to stay with him until tomorrow night, until Valentine's Day is over. What does that even mean? What's this guy's deal, Stella? His pitch climbed higher. Besides, tomorrow's Valentine's Day. I was going to take you somewhere nice for dinner. Yes, Neil. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Mr. Huxley is asking this of me. The silence on the line stretched long enough to make her grip tighten. Then, oh, so why? Because he's some rich snob? Behind her, Conan's shoulders shifted. She didn't need to turn around to know he'd heard. A mocking smile would be spreading across that infuriating face. Stella stepped further from the fireplace, turning her back fully to Conan. Her voice dropped low. Neil, I'm serious. This man is set on spending tomorrow with me. Can't you talk to your father or something? She gripped the phone tighter. You always say he's an important man in this city. Can he get me out of this? Babe, the guy owns nightclubs. Seems like a dangerous type. He went quiet for a beat, and when he spoke again, his voice turned curious, almost eager. Wait, does he want to sleep with you? Stella, what kind of trouble did you get yourself into? She heard him breathing on the other end. So, did he offer you anything in return? Her stomach turned. She inhaled sharply, the air burning her lungs. Yes, Neil. He offered $5 million. What? You heard me. Her voice came out cold, brittle. He said he'd give me $5 million in return. The line crackled. When Neil spoke again, the shock had melted into something else, something that made her skin crawl. Stella, $5 million. That's great money. He was speaking faster now, excitement bleeding through every word. I mean, I don't know. If you're just going to chat or whatever, maybe we should think about this. Do you know what this means? We could make our Far East honeymoon dream come true, and I could open a gallery independent from my father, or we could buy a nice little house in Gold Coast. He laughed, actually laughed. My God, Stella, $5 million is good money. The room tilted. Her blood ran cold, then hot, then cold again. When she spoke, her voice came out barely above a whisper. Neil, am I hearing this right? Each word felt like swallowing glass. You're telling me to accept the offer? Really? Baby, an opportunity like this doesn't come around every day. Think about it. Your one day is worth $5 million. He let out a low whistle. I'm proud of you, babe. She ended the call without another word. Her hand dropped to her side, the phone suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. Am I really marrying this man? The question rose slowly, wrapping around her throat. Really? She stared at the dark window, her own reflection staring back, pale, hollow, lost. Conan studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Where did you learn that, Stella? That you're only lovable when you don't cause trouble? Her smile turned sharp, defensive. I'm not doing therapy with you, Mr. Huxley. You're a social worker. He said it like a fact, not a question. You help people for a living. Stella's brow furrowed. How do you know that? He shrugged. I can find out anything about anyone. She turned back to the fire, something uncomfortable crawling up her spine. People think we save others, she said quietly. We don't. Conan tilted his head. Then what do you do? We stand next to them, when no one else will. Her thumb traced the rim of her glass. We work with people who learned early not to ask for too much, kids who are easy, women who don't complain. Conan's gaze never wavered. Sounds familiar. Stella stiffened. It's not about me. Conan's lips curved slightly. It never is. That's the point. She let out a breath that might have been a laugh. I didn't choose this job because I'm kind. I chose it because I don't like being a burden. Conan's eyes dropped to her hands, to the pale marks scattered across her skin. They are beautiful, he said softly. Stella glanced down. Vitiligo. Started when I was 15. I know what it is. His voice carried something she hadn't heard before, gentleness. I read once that it happens when people suppress their emotions for too long. The immune system turns on itself. His gaze dropped to the marks on her skin. My mother had it. Stella looked up. His voice softened further. She spent most of her life acting like she didn't deserve to take up space. Something tightened in Stella's throat. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like he was speaking to a part of her that never talked back. Conan leaned forward. Don't hide them. They make you unforgettable. Stella's lips parted. She wanted to say something sharp, something to regain control, but the words wouldn't come. What kind of Mafia boss talks like this? The thought rose unbidden. He's too deep for that world. Conan stood. Are you hungry? Stella blinked. It's almost 2 a.m. So, he offered his hand. I want to spend every minute of my 24 hours with you. Come. She followed him down a wide corridor toward the kitchen, watching his back, the broad shoulders, the easy confidence in his stride. 4 years with Neil. 4 years without looking at another man. But this one... Her pulse quickened despite herself. This one is starting to make my heart race, she admitted to herself. The kitchen was all white marble and warm pendant lighting, twice the size of her entire apartment. Stella leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him work. He'd rolled his sleeves to the elbows. That was the problem. Those forearms, tanned, corded with muscle, veins standing out beneath the skin. Nothing like the man who'd lounged in that leather chair at the club, dripping with expensive indifference. This version of Conan Huxley moved with purpose, pulling ingredients from the Sub-Zero fridge, laying out bread on a cutting board like he'd done it 1,000 times. Stella's mouth went dry. She forced herself to look away, studying the copper pots hanging above the island instead. But her mind refused to cooperate. How old is he? The question surfaced before she could stop it. Late 30s? Early 40s? She'd assumed older when she first saw him, something about the way he commanded every room he entered. But watching him now, the sharp angle of his jaw catching the light, she wasn't so sure. And that voice, low and unhurried, like whiskey poured slow. I've never heard a voice like that, she admitted to herself. Not once in my life. She shook her head slightly, forcing herself to focus. Stella, get a grip. The kitchen door swung open behind her. Lucy appeared, already tying her robe tighter. Her eyes went wide when she spotted Conan at the counter. Mr. Huxley. She rushed forward. Please don't trouble yourself. Let me make something for you and your guest. Conan turned, knife still in hand. His voice was gentle but firm. Lucy, it's late. Go to bed. Lucy hesitated. But, sir... He set down the knife, wiping his hands on a linen towel. I want to do this myself. When you want to show someone they matter, you don't outsource the effort. His gaze shifted to Stella. That small smile appeared, just at the corner of his mouth, barely there, like they shared a secret no one else was in on. Warmth bloomed in Stella's chest and spread upward. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, feeling the flush creep up her neck. Lucy glanced between them, something unreadable crossing her face. Then she nodded once and retreated through the door. They were alone again. 5 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the island, perched on leather bar stools, plates of smoked salmon sandwiches between them, crusty sourdough, whipped cream cheese, capers, fresh dill, the kind of thing you'd pay $20 for at some trendy brunch spot in Soho. Stella took a bite. The flavors hit her tongue, salt and smoke and something bright, maybe lemon, and her eyes widened. Oh my God! She covered her mouth, still chewing. Where did you learn to make sandwiches like this? Conan watched her with quiet amusement. I own nightclubs, remember? Stella shook her head. That doesn't explain... He cut her off gently. I don't just inspect what customers see. He picked up his own sandwich, turning it in his hands. The kitchens, the storage rooms, the back alleys where deliveries arrive at 4 a.m. If something's wrong in those places, it shows up everywhere else eventually. His eyes met hers. I pay attention to what's invisible. Stella felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the armor she'd been building all night. He notices things, she thought, the parts nobody else looks at. She took another bite, buying herself time to think. A drop of mayonnaise escaped the corner of her mouth. Before she could reach for a napkin, Conan's hand moved. Slow, deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. His thumb brushed the edge of her lip, wiping the mayonnaise clean. The touch lasted no more than a second, barely a whisper of contact, but heat shot through her like a current. Stella's teeth sank into her lower lip. She grabbed a napkin, wiping her mouth harder than necessary, like she could scrub away the memory of his touch. Why is he looking at me like that? The question flickered through her mind, unbidden. Something twisted low in her belly, not quite pain, not quite pleasure, somewhere in between, and it made breathing harder than it should be. She steadied herself with a long breath. "So, how'd you end up in this?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Clubs, nightlife, all of it." She gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. "You don't seem like someone who needs any of that." Conan set down his sandwich. For a moment he said nothing, just studied her with those blue eyes like frozen sky that gave away nothing. Then he shrugged, one shoulder lifting slightly. "I don't like daylight people." Stella blinked. "What does that mean?" Conan's gaze drifted toward the darkened windows. "In daylight, everyone pretends." His voice dropped, taking on a different texture, rougher, more honest. "They perform. They curate. They show you exactly what they want you to see." He turned back to her. "At night, they forget how." The pendant lights hummed softly overhead. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the half-hour. Conan leaned forward, forearms resting on the marble counter. The distance between them shrank. His voice dropped lower. "People show you who they really are after midnight. Fear, desire, shame." His gaze held hers, unblinking. "That's when you see the truth." Stella's skin prickled with awareness, every nerve ending suddenly alert. "So, you watch them?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Like some kind of observer?" Conan tilted his head, considering the question. "I give them a place to be honest." His tone softened, just slightly, just enough to notice. "And I make sure they don't hurt anyone while they are." The words hung in the air between them. Stella found herself leaning closer, drawn in despite every warning bell ringing in her head. "This is dangerous," she thought. "He's dangerous." But she didn't pull back. Conan's expression shifted. Something harder entered his gaze, not cruel, but certain, absolute. "Control isn't about violence, Stella." He said her name like it belonged to him. "It's about seeing trouble before it starts, and putting yourself between it and the people who can't fight back." Stella stared at him. In 4 years with Neil, she'd never heard him talk about protecting anyone. Not once. Neil talked about opportunity, about networking, about what he could get out of any situation. This man talked about putting himself in front of the bullet. "Who are you?" The question kept circling in her head. "What made you this way?" She opened her mouth to ask, but the words died on her tongue. Because Conan was looking at her the way no one had ever looked at her before, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve, like she was worth the time it would take, like she mattered. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "This is a mistake," she told herself. "He bought you for 24 hours. He runs nightclubs and God knows what else. You don't know anything about him." But her body wasn't listening. She was already leaning in. I should be terrified, she realized. And that terrified her more, because she wasn't. She couldn't look away from him. Every time she tried, forcing her gaze to the cabinets, the floor, the dark windows, it drifted right back to the way he moved, to the way his voice had gone soft when he talked about standing between trouble and the people who couldn't fight it. What happened to your plan, Stella? The thought needled at her. The boring conversation, the long silences, make him regret buying you. That plan felt like it belonged to someone else now, and that terrified her more than anything he'd said so far. Conan moved through the kitchen with efficient grace, stacking plates and wiping down the marble. Stella grabbed her own dish before he could reach it. "I can help." She carried the plate to the dishwasher, bending to slide it onto the lower rack. Their hands touched. His fingers brushed against hers over the open drawer, warm, unhurried, lingering for half a second too long. Stella straightened quickly. Conan was already leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching her with that half-smile she was starting to recognize. "What's so funny?" Her voice came out sharper than she'd meant. He tilted his head. "Hour and a half ago, you thought I was kidnapping you." His smile widened just slightly. "Now you're loading my dishwasher." Stella lifted her chin. "I'm being polite. You made me a sandwich. I can clean up." Conan nodded, but the smile didn't fade. Then his gaze dropped to her collarbone, and he stepped closer, slow, deliberate, his fingers rising toward her throat. Stella froze as he touched the pendant resting against her skin. Electricity sparked where his fingertips grazed her. "Beautiful necklace." His voice dropped low. "Why a broken star?" Stella's hand moved instinctively, covering the pendant. Her throat tightened around words that didn't want to come out. "When I was a kid, my dad and I used to sit in the backyard and look at the stars together." Her voice cracked despite herself. "Everyone always pointed at the brightest ones, named them, bragged about knowing the constellations." She swallowed hard. "I was always more curious about the dimmer ones, the ones nobody noticed." Conan didn't move, didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed fixed on hers, patient and present. "He used to tell me," pressure built behind her eyes, "some stars don't shine loud. They still matter." She blinked against the sting. "After he died, I bought this to remember him by." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with something unspoken. Then Conan reached up, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek in his palm. His thumb brushed beneath her eye, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "A good father?" His voice softened to something almost reverent. "Sounds like he saw you." Stella's breath caught in her throat. His hand slid down and took hers. "Come with me." He tugged gently. "There's something I want to show you." Why am I letting him do this? The question looped through Stella's mind as she followed him out of the kitchen, through the hallway, up one flight of stairs, then another. His hand stayed wrapped around hers, firm but not tight. She could pull away any time she wanted. She didn't. Her feet kept moving, and her fingers stayed laced through his, even as every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake. They emerged onto a rooftop terrace. The night air hit her face, crisp and cold, but that wasn't what made her stop. A glass-enclosed alcove sat at the far end, filled with oversized cushions and thick blankets. And in the center, pointed at the sky, a professional telescope. Stella stared. A smile spread across her face before she could stop it. "Okay." She turned to him. "This is definitely a surprise." Conan raised an eyebrow. "What?" She gestured at the telescope. "You watch stars up here? Or do you spy on the neighbors?" He laughed, low and real, and her stomach did something unexpected. "Sorry to disappoint you on the whole villain thing." He walked toward the alcove. "Come here." Down below, at the mansion's front entrance, Fabio leaned against the stone wall. Dan stood beside him, arms crossed, both of them staring up at the terrace. Fabio spoke first. "Last Valentine's Day, he broke a guy's jaw for humming." Dan nodded slowly. "Tonight? Stargazing." Fabio shook his head and made the sign of the cross. Dan reached into his jacket and pulled out a cigarette. Fabio shot him a look. "Relax." Dan lit up, inhaling deep. "I only smoke on special occasions." He exhaled toward the sky. First one in 2 days. On the terrace, Conan adjusted the telescope, lowering it to match Stella's height. Then he moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders, guiding her into position. Every nerve ending in her body went live. His chest was inches from her back. She could feel the heat radiating off him, Smell the cologne she was starting to memorize, amber and tobacco and something darker underneath that made her skin feel too tight, too sensitive. Look through here. His voice was close to her ear. Too close. She bent toward the eyepiece. The stars leapt into focus, sharper and closer than she'd ever seen them, and a gasp escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Oh my God!" The words came out breathless. "I've never looked through a real telescope. They're so close." Conan watched her smiling face for a moment. Then he moved closer, his cheek nearly brushing hers as they both peered at the same patch of sky. "Look up and to the right." His breath was warm against her temple. "See it? The one that looks like it's barely flickering?" Stella adjusted. "Yeah, it doesn't look special." Conan's voice softened. "It's not supposed to. That's Alnilam, part of Orion's belt." He let the words settle between them. "One of the largest stars we know. Burns hotter than almost anything else up there. You just wouldn't guess it from how quiet it looks." Stella pulled back from the eyepiece and turned to face him. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough to see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes. "So people underestimate it," she said quietly. Conan held her gaze. "Only the ones who confuse noise with power." The world narrowed to just him. Just this, something tightened in Stella's core, a coiling tension she'd never felt before. Her breathing came faster, anticipation building until she could barely think straight. Her body was responding to him in ways she didn't understand, couldn't control, and wasn't sure she wanted to stop. She tried to smile, tried to break the spell. "Mr. Huxley," her voice wavered, "you are trying to impress me, aren't you?" Conan reached up slowly. His fingers brushed the hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. His gaze stayed locked on hers, dark, intent, burning. "If I were trying to impress you," he said softly, "you'd be thinking." He leaned closer. "Not breathing." His lips moved toward hers slowly, closing the distance breath by breath, close enough to taste her air. He brushed his mouth against hers, barely a touch, and stopped. Stella's breath caught in her throat. Then the kiss hit her like a wave, soft at first, barely a whisper of contact, and then deeper. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and fire licked through her veins. She felt the world tilt beneath her feet, felt her hands reach for him without permission, gripping the fabric of his shirt like an anchor. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like he had all the time in the world, like she was the only thing that existed. Her lips parted under his, and desire coiled tight in her lower abdomen, an ache she'd never felt before, sharp and sweet and terrifying. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Stella's hands were still fisted in his shirt, her body trembling. Then the reality of what she'd just done slammed into her. She stepped back, releasing him like the contact had burned. "This isn't—" She shook her head, heart pounding. "We shouldn't have done that." Conan didn't chase her. He stayed exactly where he was, hands falling to his sides. "You're right." His voice came out rough, unsteady. "I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself." He took a deliberate step backward, putting space between them. "Sit with me." He gestured toward the cushions on the ground. "I won't touch you. Promise." He lowered himself onto the thick rug, back against the floor pillow. He picked up a blanket, then patted the spot beside him. "Like you used to do with your father." His voice gentled. "Watching the stars." Stella hesitated. Every rational part of her screamed to go back inside. But something about the way he looked at her, open, patient, not pushing, made her stay. She sat down slowly, leaving careful distance between them. Stella pulled her knees to her chest, hugging them close. "Why is Valentine's Day such a lonely night for you?" She glanced at him sideways, teeth sinking into her lower lip. "I'm sure there are plenty of women who'd want to be here." Conan tilted his head back, staring at the sky. The playfulness had vanished from his face. What remained was something raw, something she hadn't seen before. "Because the only woman I ever bought flowers for—" His voice went flat, stripped of all emotion. "Never made it to dinner." Something hollow opened up inside Stella's chest. He lost someone, she realized. someone he loved. She wanted to reach for his hand, wanted to say something that mattered, but the words stuck in her throat. "I'm sorry." It came out barely above a whisper. What happened to her? Conan's expression shuttered, his jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice had gone hard. "I don't want to talk about this." He turned to look at her, and something fierce flickered in his eyes. "Not now." His gaze held hers, unreadable, guarded, but burning underneath. "Right now, I'm with you." The words hung in the air between them. Stella's heart stuttered in her chest, then his voice softened, almost vulnerable. "And call me Conan, please." His eyes searched hers. "I need to hear you say my name." Stella opened her eyes to stars. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she felt it, her head resting on something warm. A heartbeat beneath her cheek. She was lying in Conan Huxley's chest. He'd fallen asleep against the glass wall, head tilted back, breathing deep and even. Stella held perfectly still. Her fingers rose toward his face, tracing the air an inch from his jaw, his lips. She wanted to touch him. She didn't dare. Her teeth sank into her lower lip. She pulled her hand back. She slipped out from under the blanket and stood. The cold air hit her immediately. She tucked the blanket around him, her fingertips brushing his shoulder, and walked away. The house was dark and silent. She found the first bedroom she'd seen earlier and collapsed onto the massive bed. Her eyes grew heavy. But as sleep pulled her under, one image stayed. Pale blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. She woke to the feeling of being watched. Stella's eyes fluttered open, and she found Conan sitting in the chair beside her bed, one ankle crossed over his knee, watching her with quiet intensity. He was wearing a grey sweatshirt and black joggers, hair damp and pushed back. In the morning light, without the tailored suit, he looked younger, softer, more dangerous. "Damn," she thought, her chest tightening. "He's even more attractive in daylight." "Good morning, beautiful." His voice was warm. Stella pushed herself up against the pillows. "Were you watching me sleep?" He didn't deny it. "With so little time left, I want to memorize every second." The words hit her somewhere unexpected. Conan stood, gesturing toward the bathroom. "I ran a bath for you. Fresh clothes in the closet." He moved toward the door, then turned back. "Not many options open this early, but I found what I could." Stella stared after him, gratitude swelling in her chest. She opened her mouth to thank him, but he was already gone. The bathroom was nearly as large as her entire apartment. Steam rose from the clawfoot tub beneath the window, rose petals floating on the surface. Stella sank into the heat and let her muscles unwind, her mind drifting. "What am I doing?" The question circled through her head. "I'm in a dangerous man's house. And I'm enjoying it." Neil's voice echoed in her memory. "One day is worth 5 million. I'm proud of you." Neil Ashford. She heard herself say it aloud, the name dripping with disgust. "What kind of spineless coward are you?" The wedding was in 6 days. 6 days until she became Mrs. Neil Ashford. Is it too late to back out? The question hung in the steam-filled air, unanswered. The clothes in the closet made her smile. A soft cashmere sweater in cream and black leggings. Comfortable, understated, exactly her style. "This is definitely my style," she murmured, running her fingers over the fabric. "But is this yours, Conan Huxley?" She said his name out loud, and caught herself smiling as she did. The realization hit her like cold water. She shouldn't be saying his name like that. Shouldn't be grinning like a teenager with a crush. She barely knew him. She was engaged to someone else. She shoved the thought aside and headed downstairs. The house looked different in daylight. Bigger, more imposing. She followed the smell of coffee toward the kitchen, where Lucy had set the table in a sun-drenched alcove. "Miss Stella," Lucy smiled warmly. "Please have a seat. Mr. Huxley is in his office." Stella thanked her, but instead of sitting, walked toward the main hallway. She followed a corridor she'd missed before, and that's when she heard the voices. Conan's voice came through the partially open door, low, controlled, and cold enough to freeze the blood in her veins. "No, I don't want apologies." Each word landed like a verdict. "I want the person who thought it was smart to test me on February 14th. Ice water flooded Stella's veins. "And Dan, make sure it's clean, not loud. I don't do messy." Then softer, almost worse. "Because if I lose control today, I won't stop." Her stomach dropped. Her thoughts scattered. This is the man who covered me with a blanket last night, she realized, who made me sandwiches and showed me the stars. And now he was ordering someone's end like scheduling a meeting. He's not a rich man pretending to be dangerous. The thought crystallized with terrible clarity. He's a dangerous man pretending to be gentle. For me. She took a step back. The door swung open. Fabio stepped out first, his face tight and serious, until his eyes landed on Stella. In an instant, like a switch had been flipped, his expression transformed into something aggressively cheerful. "Good morning, ma'am." His voice was theatrical, too bright. "Isn't it a beautiful morning?" Stella couldn't respond. Fabio turned to Dan. "Come on, fresh air. Sunshine like this, you don't waste it." Dan blinked. "Yes, sunshine. Very good." He hesitated. "And maybe tea, while sunbathing?" Fabio nodded too rapidly. "Exactly. Tea, in the sun." Neither looked at her again. They walked away, and the moment they rounded the corner, Stella saw Fabio's shoulders drop, heard Dan exhale. She stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding. Something was very wrong. For the first time since she'd arrived, real fear settled in her bones. "So, you didn't start breakfast without me." The voice came from behind her, warm, playful, like nothing had happened. Stella turned slowly. Conan stood in the doorway, smiling with that same easy warmth he'd shown all night. The same man who'd touched her face like she was precious. The same man who'd just ordered someone to be dealt with. "Who are you, really, Conan Huxley?" The question burned on her tongue, but she couldn't bring herself to ask. After the breakfast Lucy had outdone herself with, Conan stood and buttoned his jacket. "Come on, Stella. We've got precious hours ahead." His eyes found hers. "I'm glad you're spending today with me. Grab your coat. We're heading out." They walked toward the garage together. Dan moved toward the driver's side of the Bentley, but Conan raised a hand, stopping him. Dan stepped closer, voice low. "Boss, is this a good idea?" His eyes flicked toward Stella, then back. Conan didn't hesitate. "I want to be alone with Stella today, Dan." His tone left no room for argument. Dan nodded once and stepped back. Conan opened the door for Stella. She slid into the passenger seat, but before she could settle, he crouched beside her. His hand reached for hers, the left one. His thumb brushed across the engagement ring. "I want you to take this off." His voice was quiet. "Just until midnight. I'll give it back to you then." Stella looked at him. "A relationship is in your head, Conan. It's not about a ring. What difference does it make if you take it? But spending just one day with you." He held her gaze. "Without seeing this ring, even if there's no tomorrow for us, it would change everything for me, Stella." She studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she slid the ring off her finger and placed it in his palm. Conan closed his fingers around it and tucked it into his pocket. Something shifted in his expression. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. He walked around to the driver's side. The Bentley rolled out of the garage and through the iron gates. Behind them, Dan and Fabio climbed into the black SUV. Fabio watched the Bentley disappear down the driveway. "Beautiful day." He stretched in his seat. "Maybe we should do something nice, too." Dan started the engine, then eased the SUV forward, keeping the Bentley's taillights in view. "What a coincidence!" His voice was flat, eyes never leaving the road. "Looks like we're heading in the same direction." Fabio nodded solemnly. "Chicago's a small town." He adjusted his seatbelt with exaggerated casualness. "Bumper distance, though." He squinted through the windshield. "We're not dating the Bentley." Dan's grip loosened on the wheel. Relax. If he brakes suddenly, I'll pretend it was destiny. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Inside the Bentley, Stella couldn't help stealing glances. Conan had traded his tailored suit for a grey sweatshirt and dark jeans, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. Behind the wheel, relaxed but focused, he looked younger, more human. The morning light caught the edge of his forearms. Athletic, casual, impossibly attractive. A warmth spread through her chest before she could stop it. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice breaking the stillness between them. His eyes stayed on the road. "I have some ideas." He glanced at her briefly, then forward again. "But I want to know, what would you want to do on a day like today?" Valentine's Day. The words landed somewhere deep, and suddenly Stella was somewhere else entirely. 3 years of Valentine's Days with Neil. 3 years of promises wrapped in red ribbons and hollow gestures. The memories surged forward, each one sharper than the last. She was sitting in that upscale restaurant downtown, watching Neil take the 15th selfie of the night. 100 red roses filled the table between them, dramatic, impossible to ignore. The waiter had to move them just to set down their plates. Neil didn't notice. He was too busy adjusting the angle of his phone, checking the lighting, scrolling through filters. She remembered smiling until her face ached, wondering when he would actually look at her instead of the screen. Wondering if the roses were for her, or for the photo. She was standing in her apartment at midnight, still in her work clothes because she'd given up waiting hours ago. Then Neil burst through the door with roses in his arms and an apology on his lips. "Work ran late, babe. You know how it is." He dropped the flowers on the counter like they'd burned him. He'd handed her a Bloomingdale's gift card like it was a trophy, like the dollar amount printed on it was supposed to mean something, and when he'd leaned in to kiss her, she caught a trace of perfume that wasn't hers lingering on his collar, something floral, something expensive. She'd pulled back, heart pounding, but his smile never wavered. She couldn't prove it. She never could. She was sitting at his parents' dining table, surrounded by his family, watching him sink to one knee with a velvet box in his hand. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was waiting. His mother had her phone out, already recording. His sister was dabbing at her eyes before Stella had even said a word. She remembered the weight of their expectations pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She waited for her heart to race, for that rush of joy she'd always imagined feeling in this moment. The moment she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl. It never came. She'd said yes anyway. What else could she do? Say no in front of his entire family? Humiliate him on camera? So she smiled. Let him slide the ring onto her finger while his mother cried and his father clapped, and everyone told her how lucky she was. It was a gesture, she told herself that night, lying awake in bed. A beautiful gesture. But now, looking back, she saw it for what it really was. An ambush. A proposal designed for an audience, not for her. A moment that was never about asking. It was about announcing. Everything had looked perfect. The realization settled over her like cold water. The choice was never hers to make. "Stella." Conan's voice pulled her back. She blinked, surprised to find her eyes stinging. "What do you want to do?" His voice was gentle, patient. She turned to face him, something shifting in her chest. "Since today means so much to you, since you were willing to pay a fortune for it, I'd rather do what's meaningful to you." The words came out steadier than she felt. A light flickered behind his eyes, brief and unguarded. He didn't say anything, just looked at her like she'd handed him something precious. The Bentley headed west, away from downtown, away from everything familiar. Snow had begun to fall, light, scattered flakes catching sunlight like glitter. The windows fogged at the edges, but inside, the leather seats were warm, the air soft with heat. Chicago's skyline grew smaller in the side mirror, and with every mile, Stella felt tension loosen inside her. She watched the snowflakes dance against the glass. They reminded her of the snow globes her father used to collect, little glass worlds where everything stayed perfect, frozen in time. She hadn't thought about those in years. For the first time in months, the noise in her head went quiet. Peace settled over her like a blanket. Why now? She was in a dangerous stranger's car, heading somewhere unknown. She should be anxious, planning her escape, texting her location to someone, anyone. Instead, all she wanted was to stay in this moment forever. Conan's hand moved slowly across the center console. He stopped just short of touching her, his fingers hovering over hers like a question. "May I?" His voice was soft, almost fragile, like he was afraid she might say no. Stella's breath caught. She looked at his hand, strong, capable, waiting, and then at his face. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the road, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way he was holding himself perfectly still. She nodded. His fingers laced through hers, warm, steady, certain, and something she'd been missing for years finally clicked into place. A hand reaching for hers, not for show, not for a photo, not because someone was watching, just because he wanted to hold it. Her throat tightened around a feeling she couldn't name. The Bentley turned onto tree-lined streets in Oak Park, old houses with wide porches, snow-covered lawns, children building snowmen in front yards. It was quieter here, slower, a different world from the glass towers of downtown. Conan pulled into the driveway of a two-story home with a wraparound veranda. White paint, green shutters, a porch swing dusted with snow. The garden was alive with winter flowers, snowdrops pushing through frost, Christmas roses blooming white and pink despite the cold. Someone had been taking care of this place, someone who loved it. Stella stepped out, boots crunching on the thin layer of snow. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, tinged with wood smoke from a nearby chimney. "What is this place?" she asked, turning to him. The question hung in the cold air between them. Conan walked toward the door, keys already in hand. His posture had changed. He seemed lighter here, softer. "Where I grew up." He slid the key into the lock. "I come back every month." He unlocked the door and held it open for her. The house was hushed inside, clean, well kept, frozen in time. Everything preserved exactly as it must have been. Stella stepped over the threshold and felt the stillness wrap around her. Family photos lined the hallway. A woman with Conan's eyes smiled from a frame near the stairs. Dark hair, warm smile, the same sharp cheekbones. "Who lives here?" Stella asked, though she was starting to understand. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Conan's voice dropped low. "No one. Not anymore." He paused, his hand resting on the doorframe like he needed the support. "I lost my mother 4 years ago. Cancer. It was quick at the end." He took a breath, his gaze drifting to the photo on the wall. "But I couldn't let this place go. It reminds me where I came from, who I was before." The sentence trailed off, unfinished. Stella understood what he couldn't say. A crack formed in Stella's heart. 4 years. The same amount of time she'd been with Neil, learning to settle, learning to shrink, learning to take up less space in her own life. This man had spent those same years holding on to what he'd lost, preserving it, coming back to it every month like a prayer. Down the street, Fabio unwrapped a sandwich while Dan stared at the house through the windshield. He met her yesterday, and he brought her here. Fabio shook his head slowly, sandwich forgotten in his hands. "He's definitely in love." Dan took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Be grateful," he swallowed. First calm February 14th in 5 years. Fabio's face fell. "But what happens tomorrow?" His voice dropped. "When she leaves?" Dan stopped chewing. His jaw tightened. "If she leaves," Fabio started. "Don't finish that sentence." Dan's words came out sharp, almost a warning. Fabio made the sign of the cross and kissed the crucifix around his neck, his fingers trembling slightly. "I'm not emotionally equipped for another February, Dan." His eyes stayed fixed on the house. "Let's pray she doesn't go, because if she does, I don't want to live February 14th every day for the rest of the year." Dan said nothing, His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. He was already praying too. While Conan watered the plants by the window, Stella wandered deeper into the living room. The shelves told a story she hadn't expected. A father lifting a boy onto his shoulders, both of them laughing into the camera. A mother watching from the porch, her smile soft and knowing. Birthday candles, Christmas mornings, beach vacations with sandy feet and sunburned noses. Then she saw the medal. Conan Huxley, age 17, Chicago Swimming Championship, first place. Her brow furrowed. This didn't make sense. Dangerous men came from dangerous places. Broken homes, violent streets, childhoods that explained the darkness inside them. But Conan could have been the boy next door in her own neighborhood. The handsome one. The one all the girls whispered about at sleepovers. Her gaze drifted to another frame, a graduation photo. A younger Conan in cap and gown, his arm wrapped around his mother's shoulders, both of them beaming at the camera. His face was softer then, unguarded. The sharp edges not yet carved by whatever had shaped him into the man standing across the room. Still, devastatingly handsome, but with an openness that had since disappeared behind walls of granite. Then she noticed the emblem in the background, and her breath caught. NYU, School of Law. She spun toward him, disbelief written across her face. You studied law? Conan glanced up from the watering can, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. He nodded once. But you're... She gestured vaguely, struggling to reconcile the image. A lawyer. He could have been a lawyer. Life is what happens while you're making other plans. The half-smile that curved his lips held something bittersweet, but he said nothing more. She turned to watch him tend to the flowers, his movements careful and practiced. This ritual meant something to him. Everything in this house did. Conan. She crossed the room toward him. This house, it reminds me of where I grew up. He set down the watering can and faced her, a half-smile playing at his lips. Were you expecting something different? His voice carried no offense, only curiosity. A tragic backstory that explains everything? She didn't answer. They both knew she had been. Sometimes, the most ordinary beginnings produce the most complicated adults. He tilted his head slightly. Does that disappoint you? Stella took a breath. The question she'd been holding back pushed its way to the surface. Conan, I heard you. In your office this morning. Her voice steadied as she spoke. You told your men to hurt someone. The air between them shifted. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, until barely a foot separated them. His finger hooked beneath her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. The touch was gentle. The intention behind it was not. When your parents can't keep you safe, his voice dropped low, each word landing with weight, you learn to become strong enough to protect them from the outside world. And when you can't protect them anymore, he stopped. Something flickered in those blue eyes. You make sure the people responsible understand what that cost you. Heat crept up Stella's neck. His eyes weren't cruel. They were something far more dangerous, protective, familiar, like looking into a mirror she didn't know existed. She stepped back, breaking the contact. You're trying to make me understand who you are. No. He let his hand fall. I'm asking you to spend a difficult day with me, sharing the things that matter. They walked back to the Bentley without a word. Conan opened her door, waited until she was settled, then rounded to the driver's side. Don't do this, Stella. The thought hit her before she could stop it. Don't compare him to Neil. That's a race Neil could never win, and you're getting married in 6 days. You can't do this to yourself. The engine hummed to life. Conan's voice cut through her thoughts. I need to make one stop. His tone had changed, rougher now, like something had caught in his throat. His expression had gone still, guarded. 10 minutes. The Bentley turned onto a familiar street. He pulled up outside a small flower shop, its windows fogged with warmth against the February cold. Stay in the car. His hand was already on the door handle. Stella watched through the window as he disappeared inside. Minutes later, he emerged carrying 2 bouquets, red roses in one arm, white in the other. The shop owner followed him to the door, pulling Conan into a tight embrace before letting him go. The old man patted Conan's cheek with weathered hands, the way a father might. Tenderness stirred in her, unexpected and unwanted. A man still connected to his roots, his neighborhood, his people. When he climbed back in, he placed the red roses gently in her lap. The petals were velvet soft against her fingers. Cliché, I know. His eyes stayed on the road. But no woman should spend today without flowers. Her gaze drifted to the back seat. The white roses lay there, waiting. 5 minutes later, they stopped outside a cemetery. The iron gates stood open, the grounds blanketed in undisturbed snow. Conan cut the engine and reached for the white roses. Wait here. His voice had gone flat, controlled. This won't take long. He walked through the gates without looking back. Stella sat motionless for a moment. Then her hand found the door handle. Maybe I should leave him alone. But curiosity had already won. The need to understand Conan Huxley pulsed through her veins like a second heartbeat. She stepped out into the cold. Down the street, Fabio watched Dan light a cigarette against the SUV's hood. You told me you only smoke twice a week. He crossed his arms. Now you're out here puffing away like it's your last day on Earth. Dan exhaled slowly and nodded toward the cemetery gates. Stella's figure was disappearing inside. Fabio's eyebrows shot up. Now that's what I call progress. He leaned forward, squinting. Think she'll slap him and run? Dan took another drag, letting the smoke curl into the winter air. She won't run. Stella walked slowly between the headstones, following Conan's footprints in the snow. She found him standing before a family plot, the white roses already resting against the marble. He turned at the sound of her approach, surprise flickering across his face. I told you to wait. His voice held no anger, only quiet disbelief. She didn't apologize. Instead, she stepped closer and let her eyes fall to the names carved into stone. William Huxley, Judith Huxley, his parents, gone years apart from the dates carved beneath their names. But it was the third headstone that made her heart stop. Stephanie Belmonte. February 14th, 2021. Valentine's Day. 5 years ago today. The air left her lungs. Not a sister. The name was too separate, too deliberately placed beside the family plot. A girlfriend. A fiancée, maybe. Someone Conan had loved enough to bury beside his parents. She turned to look at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on Stephanie's name like he was having a conversation only the two of them could hear. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, too small for this moment. She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek before she could think better of it. You lost her. On this day. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Just let her touch him like it was the first gentle thing he'd felt in years. Conan, no one can protect everyone, her voice cracked. Not even you. He caught her wrist, not to stop her, but to hold her there. His other hand rose to her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with impossible tenderness. Let's do something you want now. His voice was rough, stripped bare. You being here with me? That's already more than enough. His eyes held hers. Now I want to make you happy. Stella felt the corners of her mouth lift despite everything. Actually, I'm a little hungry. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. The first real one she'd seen since they left the house. Then let me take you somewhere you've never tasted anything like before. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The restaurant sat on the edge of Lake Michigan, tucked between old fishing docks. No valet, no velvet ropes, just wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and windows fogged with kitchen warmth. Conan held the door open. The smell hit her immediately. Butter, garlic, fresh bread, something briny and alive. A man in his 60s emerged from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a flour-dusted apron, his face split into a grin. Huxley. He pulled Conan into a bear hug. Where the hell have you been? We missed you around here. Conan returned the embrace with genuine warmth. Good to see you, Wes. How's business? Can't complain. Wes pulled back, his eyes finding Stella. He studied her with open curiosity. No pretense, just honest assessment. And who's this beautiful lady? He raised an eyebrow. Special day? Special guest? Stella opened her mouth to explain. I'm not his girlfriend. This isn't what it looks like. But nothing came out. She settled for a smile instead. Conan's gaze stayed on her as he answered. Very special, Wes. I need your freshest lake fish, those cheesy oysters everyone talks about, and your best white wine. He placed his hand on the small of her back. Give us the table by the fireplace. And she had no idea why that terrified her more than the cemetery had. An hour later, Stella leaned back in her chair and pressed a hand to her stomach. I can't remember the last time I ate this much. The words came out lazy, satisfied. The fireplace crackled beside them, its warmth seeping into her bones. 3 glasses of wine had loosened something inside her she hadn't realized was wound so tight. Wes kept stopping by their table with stories about Conan, the teenager who used to bust tables here, the young man who still showed up even after he'd become someone important. It felt like a first date with someone she actually liked. The thought landed before she could stop it. Laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep, spilling out before she could catch it. She found herself giggling at something Conan said, really giggling, the kind of sound she hadn't made in years. Then she heard herself. Her smile froze. Heat flooded her face as reality crashed back in. What am I doing? Laughing like a schoolgirl while Neil's probably calling my phone? She straightened in her chair, reaching for composure like a lifeline. Conan noticed the shift. He reached across the table, his fingers wrapping around her hand before she could pull away. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted it to his lips. His mouth brushed the back of her hand, right where the pale patches of vitiligo marked her skin like scattered moonlight. The kiss was soft, barely there, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. Stella bit her lower lip and eased her hand back. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Conan released her without resistance. Something knowing passed across his face. All right then. His voice stayed even, unbothered. Where to next? Her phone buzzed. Her stomach clenched. Is that Neil? But it wasn't Neil. It was Steve from work. Need your signature on the Rodriguez placement, Harbour House, tonight. She stared at the screen longer than necessary, scrolling through her notifications. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. Valentine's Day, and her fiancé hadn't even checked if she was alive. Actually, she looked up, her voice steadier than she felt. I need to make a work stop. Half an hour, maybe less. A woman needs my signature to get placed tonight. She hesitated. Is that okay? Absolutely. Conan signaled for the check. I admire people who take their work seriously. The Bentley rolled through neighborhoods that looked nothing like the lakefront. Chain-link fences, boarded windows, streets where people kept their heads down. Harbour House appeared between a laundromat and a check cashing place, a 3-story brick building with bars on the windows. Stella found herself talking before they even reached the entrance. I work with women escaping dangerous situations. She wasn't sure why she was explaining. He hadn't asked. Violence? Threats? Homelessness? I help them find safe places to rebuild. Conan stopped walking. She turned to face him, suddenly self-conscious. It doesn't pay much. My fiancé thinks it's a waste of my degree. That was the moment she realized she was in serious trouble. Conan stepped closer. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Stella Webster. His voice dropped low, rough with something she couldn't name. You make a difference in people's lives. You help them feel safe when everything else has failed them. He let the words land. That's not a waste. That's extraordinary. Butterflies rioted in her stomach. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. 4 years. 4 years of Neil rolling his eyes when she talked about work. 4 years of feeling like what she did didn't matter to the person who was supposed to matter most. And here was a stranger, a dangerous, complicated stranger, looking at her like she'd just told him she saved the world. "Don't fall for this," her inner voice screamed. "Two kind words and you're melting?" But her inner voice couldn't reach the part of her that was already falling. From a rusted Civic parked across the street, Fabio watched Dan shove a powdered donut into his mouth. "You had a heart attack 2 months ago." Fabio's arms were crossed. "Do you have a death wish?" Dan chewed slowly, sugar coating his lips. "This is why I never got married. 52 years old, and I don't need anyone nagging me about what I eat." Fabio turned his attention back to Harbour House. Through the glass doors, he could see Conan and Stella standing close together. The boss was looking at her like she was the only person on earth. "Boss was right," Fabio shook his head. "What's a girl like that doing with some Ferrari-driving trust fund kid?" He glanced at the shelter entrance. "They're spending Valentine's Day a little differently. I thought it'd be more romantic." "Marketing Day," Dan mumbled through a mouthful of donut. "No. Valentine's Day is supposed to mean something." Fabio's voice turned serious. "It's about appreciating what you have." Dan snorted. "When's the last time you spent Valentine's Day with a woman? High school?" "Huh, very funny." Fabio straightened his jacket with wounded dignity. "I have a romantic side, I just don't show it at work." Dan reached for another donut. "Please don't." Inside Harbour House, Stella found Steve waiting with a stack of paperwork, a few signatures, a brief exchange about the Rodriguez case, and she was done. She turned toward the exit when a voice stopped her. "Stella, honey." Jane Crowley, the shelter's director, hurried toward them. 2 minutes? I need to discuss Trudy, the new arrival." Jane's steps faltered the moment she noticed Conan. "Mr. Huxley." Her eyes went wide. "I didn't expect. What a pleasure to see you here." She reached for his hands, clasping them between both of hers. "Your donations have kept us afloat. You're one of the few people who actually cares about what we do." Conan dipped his head, humble in a way Stella hadn't seen before. "Of course, Mrs. Crowley. If you need anything extra, please contact my assistant." Stella's lungs forgot how to work. Jane pulled her aside for the Trudy discussion, but Stella barely heard a word. Her eyes kept drifting to the glass doors, where Conan waited by the car, hands in his pockets, snow catching in his dark hair. He donates to women's shelters. He visits his childhood home every month. He buried the woman he loved on Valentine's Day. Who was this man? When she finally walked toward him, her mind was a war zone. Kiss him, grab his sweatshirt, pull him close and do things that would make you blush just thinking about them. She did none of those things. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. "I spent 10 minutes explaining what this place does, and you're their donor?" Conan opened her door. "Get in, I'll explain." She didn't move. "Why?" His eyes found hers. "Because some things aren't meant to be announced, Stella. They're just meant to be done." The Bentley merged into traffic. Conan's voice broke the stillness. "What do you want to do now?" His tone had softened. "For Valentine's Day. If there's something you've always wanted, it would make me happy to give it to you." His phone rang before she could answer. Conan answered, and Fabio's voice filled the car. "Boss, we got a problem. That guy from last night." Conan switched to private mode, pressing the phone to his ear. She watched his profile change, expression hardening, eyes going cold. "I told you to handle it, Fabio." His voice turned hard, commanding. "I don't want him anywhere near my club." He hung up. Stella felt like she'd been dunked in ice water. Just when her heart had started racing for this man, reality slapped her back. "I'm waiting for your answer, Stella." She swallowed. "I don't want a crowded fancy restaurant." The word surprised her. "Can we just go home?" His voice tightened. "You want me to take you home?" There was something raw in the question. Worry. "Our contract isn't over yet." She glanced at her watch. 5 hours left. She met his eyes. "Your house, Conan. Pizza." A small smile tugged at her lips. "If that's okay." Conan's lips curved. "Pizza on Valentine's Day." She shrugged. "I've never enjoyed anything at a fancy restaurant more than pizza." "Then pizza it is." His hand found hers on the console. Homemade, by the fire. An hour later, Lucy was practically spinning circles around Conan in the kitchen. "Mr. Huxley, please let me prepare the pizza." "I'd be happy to." Conan had already rolled up his sleeves, surveying the flour, yeast and tomatoes spread across the counter. "Lucy, take the night off. I've got this." Stella perched on a stool at the kitchen island, chin propped on her hand, watching with barely concealed amusement. Lucy hesitated at the door, clearly torn between duty and direct orders. Finally, she left. Stella slid off the stool and moved to his side. "Give me the ingredients. I'll chop." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "You know we could have just ordered delivery. You're only saying that because you haven't tasted my wood-fired pizza." He handed her a knife and a cutting board. She couldn't help the laugh that escaped. "The thought of seeing you covered in flour is already exciting me." The words hung in the air. Her cheeks burned the moment she realized what she'd said. Conan raised one eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I like the sound of that." He leaned closer. "I've heard men in kitchen are considered attractive." Stella turned her head away, biting her lip hard. "That's not what I meant." But they both knew it was exactly what she meant. An hour later, they sat by the fireplace. The pizza, golden, bubbling, impossibly good, was nearly gone. Stella had already finished her third glass of wine. "I told you." Conan refilled her glass. "You won't find pizza like this, even in Naples." "You've been feeding me all day." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "I've probably gained 5 pounds. The fire painted warm shadows across his face. The wine, the heat, the intimacy of the moment. It was all blurring together. Conan rose and extended his hand. "Come sit with me." He led her to the plush armchairs by the hearth. They sank into the cushions side by side, close enough that their shoulders touched. The fire crackled. Snow fell silently outside the windows. "Conan." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "I didn't expect today to be this beautiful." She turned to look at him. "I should thank you." "No." His eyes held hers, ice blue in the firelight. "Thank you for giving me this chance. You have no idea what today meant to me." Stella glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:45 p.m. Just over an hour before she'd have to leave. Before this day would become nothing but a memory. They sat together without speaking, letting the minutes slip away. The fire whispered. The snow fell. And somewhere in the warmth of that room, surrounded by everything she should be running from, Stella felt the unexpected peace of being exactly where they were. Conan reached into his pocket and placed Stella's engagement ring on the coffee table. The diamond caught the firelight, scattering tiny sparks across the polished wood. Stella stared at it. Dread coiled low in her gut, a visceral reaction she couldn't explain. Conan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Stella, you know you don't have to marry him, right?" She shook her head, a small gesture that made it clear she didn't want to go there. "Listen to me." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping low. "I'm not asking you to choose me. But that man, he's not your equal. He doesn't have your depth. He can't carry your heart, your soul." Stella's fingers curled around her wineglass. "I appreciate you seeing me like I'm some kind of shining star." Her voice wavered despite her best effort. "But I made a promise. Every relationship comes with disappointment. That's just life. There's no such thing as the perfect person, not for anyone." Conan reached over. His fingers brushed her chin, turning her face toward his. His gaze held hers with an intensity that made her pulse skip. "Do you really believe that?" Stella looked into those winter blue eyes. The air vanished from her chest. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Recognizing what she felt, falling for him, letting him under her skin so deep she'd never dig him out. Tears welled in her brown eyes before she could stop them. "Please." The word cracked in her throat. "Please. Don't make my life harder than it already is." Something hardened in his expression. "I'm trying to keep you from making it harder yourself." Her hand trembled. The wine glass tilted. Red spread across his grey sweatshirt like a wound blooming open. "God, I'm sorry." She lunged for napkins, face burning with mortification. "It's fine." He caught her wrist, stilling her frantic movements, then stood. "I'll change. Stay here." His thumb traced a circle on her pulse point before releasing her. "Clock hasn't run out yet. Don't leave without saying goodbye, okay?" He disappeared up the stairs. Stella sat frozen. Her gaze drifted to the clock, to the ring, back to the stairs. She pressed her fingers into her hair, gripping hard. "No," she whispered, "you're not doing this." But her body had already decided. Her heart had already chosen. She rose. One step, then another. Then she was climbing the stairs. Each step made her chest tighter, like she wasn't ascending but sinking, deeper and deeper into water she couldn't escape. The door stood open. Warm light spilled into the hallway. She stepped inside. Conan faced the closet, his back to her. The sweatshirt was gone. His shoulders were broad, muscles coiled tight like he was bracing for a fight he knew was coming. Heat bloomed low in her belly. Her skin felt too tight, too sensitive. "Stella." He turned. Surprise flickered across his face before something darker replaced it. Her name left his mouth like a prayer or a warning. She moved closer. One step. Another. They both knew there was no going back. She placed her palms flat against his bare chest. His skin burned beneath her touch. His heartbeat slammed against her fingers, fast and hard and desperate. His hand covered hers, pressing it harder against him. "You don't have to do this, Stella." "Please." The words splintered on her lips. "Don't stop me." Something in his eyes caught fire. Like every demon he'd been holding back had broken its chains all at once. His mouth crashed into hers. Not gentle, not asking, taking. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off the ground. Her back hit the wall and she gasped against his lips. Her legs wound around his waist on pure instinct, pulling him impossibly closer. In one fluid motion, his hands found the hem of her sweater. It vanished over her head, forgotten before it touched the floor. He buried his face between her breasts, breathing her in like she was oxygen he'd been denied for years. A moan tore from her throat, raw, unguarded, shameless. She had never wanted anyone like this. Never. Her body hummed with an awareness that bordered on pain. He carried her to the bed, laying her down with a tenderness that contradicted everything burning in his eyes. His lips traced down her body as he peeled away her leggings. Every inch of exposed skin received his devotion. Kisses, whispers, the slow drag of his tongue. When he reached the pale patches of vitiligo scattered across her thighs like moonlight on water, he pressed his lips to each one. His tongue traced their edges, worshipping what she'd always tried to hide. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Stella." His voice was rough gravel against silk. A slow burn ignited in her core. Her fingers twisted in his hair, pulling him closer. Her body arched toward him, desperate for more, always more. He worked his way back up her body, bracing himself above her on his forearms. His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any reason to stop. "Do you want this?" She held his gaze without flinching. "Yes." Something inside him snapped. She could see it, the last chain breaking, the final thread of control severing. He captured her wrists in one hand and pressed them into the pillow above her head. Not rough, but certain enough that she couldn't run, even if she wanted to. "Good." His voice was gravel and velvet, darkness and heat. "Because I've been thinking about this all day long." Her lips parted, breath coming fast. "Me too." His mouth found her neck. One kiss. Another. The distance between them disappeared completely. When he finally filled her, his lips brushed her ear. "Be mine, Stella." His voice cracked, stripped raw. "Say you'll be mine. I need you." She surrendered completely. Her moans filled the room, uncontrolled for the first time in her life. Every nerve ending lit up at once. The pleasure was unlike anything she'd ever known. She felt safe and dangerous at the same time, falling and flying, losing herself and finally, being found. The world narrowed to just him. Just this. Her entire body trembled beneath him. He didn't stop. He took her to the edge and past it. In the final moment, his fingers gripped her hair. They shattered together, two people who'd spent their whole lives searching for something they'd only just realized they needed, each other. They lay tangled together, breathless. Conan shifted, pulling her into his lap. His fingers traced through her hair, brushed across her cheek. He pressed a soft kiss to her lips. Stella's eyes glistened. Her lower lip trembled despite her efforts to steady it. She wrapped her arms tight around his neck and buried her face there, breathing him in. The intensity of what she felt terrified her. Was this lust? Was this love? Why couldn't she stand the thought of being apart from him for even a single second? Stella. His voice was a whisper against her ear. Whatever you're thinking right now, the feelings are already there. You feel something for me. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. What just happened between us? It was real. You know that, right? She turned her face away. I shouldn't have done this. Her voice came out small, fractured. I'm not this kind of person. He guided her face back to his, gentle but insistent. What kind of person? Someone who feels? His thumb stroked her cheek. A promise to a man who doesn't deserve you. Is that really more important than what your heart wants? He took her hand and pressed it flat against his chest. His heart pounded against her palm. Feel this, Stella? I fell in love with you the moment I saw you. Before I even knew you, I felt like I already did. He kissed her. Deep. Hungry. Like he was trying to make her understand something words couldn't capture. She whispered against his lips. Conan, I have to go. No. His arms tightened around her. Stay. Tonight. Stay with me. His mouth traced along her jaw. Let me breathe you in a little longer. Let me feel you. His hands gripped her hips, pulling her closer. She kissed him back with everything she had, her legs wrapping around him again, the heat between them built all over again. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to want someone with every cell of her body, every beat of her heart. When the rhythm found them again, she knew this moment would stay with her forever, no matter what happened next. But she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. Conan woke to something unfamiliar. Peace. He reached across the mattress, expecting warmth, expecting her. The pillow still held the indent of her head. Her scent clung to the sheets, to his skin, and a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth before he could stop it. Then his hand found cold linen. His eyes snapped open. The bed was empty. Stella? Silence answered. He sat up, scanning the room. Her clothes were gone. He threw back the covers, pulled on sweatpants, and moved barefoot to the bathroom. Nothing. He took the stairs two at a time. The living room stretched out before him, quiet and still. His gaze shot to the coffee table. The ring was gone. He turned. Lucy stood in the kitchen doorway. She left a few minutes ago, Mr. Huxley. Her voice dropped. Miss Stella was crying. Conan's teeth sank into his lower lip. He nodded once and turned toward the stairs. He climbed slowly this time, each step heavier than the last. Halfway up, he stopped. His knuckles went white around the railing. Loss carved a hollow place in his ribs. This wasn't like losing Stephanie. That grief had been clean, final. This was different. This clawed at him from the inside, refusing to let go. Damn it, Stella! The words scraped out of him, rough and low. Don't you dare tell me you're still planning to marry him. He stood frozen on the stairs while ache settled deep into his bones. The Uber crawled through morning traffic. Stella sat in the back, the engagement ring clutched tight in her palm. Tears tracked hot down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them. What am I supposed to do now? The whisper barely left her lips. Damn you, Conan Huxley. How do you just walk into my life and turn everything upside down? By the time she reached the apartment, her face was dry, but her eyes were still swollen. She knocked. Helen cracked the door open, then pulled it wider. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Stella, what happened? You didn't answer your phone. Stella frowned. Why are you whispering? Helen tilted her head toward the living room. Stella stepped inside and stopped. Her mother sat on the couch, coffee cup in hand, a bright smile spreading across her face. "Sweetheart!" Debbie Webster rose to her feet. "I came early, figured you might need help with wedding preparations." Stella crossed the room and hugged her. "Hi, Mom." Debbie pulled back, studying her with a mother's sharp eye. "Helen says you haven't picked up your dress yet. Why are you cutting it so close?" Helen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Who knows, Debbie? Maybe Stella's having second thoughts." Debbie's expression soured. "That's not funny." She turned back to Stella. "You two have been in love for 4 years. This wedding is going to be perfect." In love for 4 years. The words landed like a fist to the solar plexus. Stella forced a smile. "I'm going to go change." She escaped down the hall, slipped into her room, and pressed her back against the door. Her clothes still smelled like him. Her skin still remembered his hands. Somewhere beneath her ribs, she already missed him. "Yes," she thought, "I'm in love, but not with Neil." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "Get it together. You cheated on your fiancé." Her hands dropped. She stared at the ceiling. Should I even marry him? Her phone buzzed against her thigh. She glanced down. A bank notification filled the screen. $5 million has been deposited into your account. Her legs gave out. She slid down the door until she hit the floor, lungs refusing to expand. The number glowed back at her, cold and clinical. Why did this feel like an insult, like payment for services rendered? Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she pressed it. Return funds to sender. Gone. All 5 million. Back where it came from. She let the phone clatter to the floor and buried her face in her hands. The Bentley cut through downtown Chicago. Conan stared out the window, his reflection a ghost against the morning light. Neither Dan nor Fabio had spoken since they left. His phone vibrated. A notification from the bank. Your transfer has been returned to your account. He blinked. Read it again. She sent it back. His voice came out barely above a whisper. She returned the money. Fabio twisted around from the passenger seat, eyes wide. "Boss?" "Fabio." Dan's voice sliced through the air. "Don't." "Mind your own business, Dan." Fabio waved him off and turned back to Conan. "Boss, what happened?" Conan was still staring at the screen. "Stella. She returned the 5 million. He looked up, something flickering behind his eyes. Why would she do that? A grin broke across Fabio's face. "Boss, only a woman in love does that. She's telling you it was never about the money." Dan shot Fabio a look. "We don't need the play-by-play. Everyone figured that out." Fabio shrugged, still grinning. "Just making sure we're all on the same page." Conan said nothing. He turned back to the window, but for the first time all morning, the hollow feeling in his chest didn't hurt quite as much. Back at the apartment, Stella sat on her bed with the door closed, trying to steady her breathing. Her phone lay face down on the mattress. $5 million returned. Gone. And she didn't regret it. Not for a second. What she did regret was everything else. Her mother's voice drifted through the thin walls, cheerful and oblivious. Helen was responding in monosyllables, clearly not in the mood for wedding talk. Then the doorbell rang. Stella heard her mother's footsteps, quick and eager. The door opened. And then, "Mrs. Webster!" A voice she knew too well. Warm, polished, rehearsed. "You look incredible. Did you do something different with your hair? It's radiant." Neil. Stella's stomach turned. She pushed herself off the bed and opened the door. In the living room, Debbie was already blushing, clutching a bouquet of white lilies like they were made of gold. "Oh, Neil, you're too sweet." Helen stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. She gave him a single nod. "Hey, Neil." He flashed her that polished grin. "Still charming as ever, Helen." "Always." Helen's expression didn't change. Neil's gaze swept the room until it landed on Stella. Something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, not relief. He crossed to her in 3 quick strides and took her arm. "Babe, let's talk in your room for a sec." His voice was soft, meant only for her. Before she could respond, he was already guiding her down the hall. The bedroom door clicked shut behind them. Neil turned to face her, his hands rubbing together like he was about to open a present. "So, did you get it?" Stella stared at him. The words didn't register at first. "Did you get the money?" He stepped closer, eyes bright with something that looked disturbingly like greed. She pulled her arm from his grip, the motion sharp. "I spent 24 hours with a complete stranger, Neil, and the first thing out of your mouth is about money?" He held up both hands, palms out. Okay, calm down, babe, I get it. Must have been rough. Boring guy, long day." He shrugged, a casual gesture that made her stomach turn. "But I knew you'd handle it. You always do, right? That's why I didn't call. Didn't want to distract you from the goal." Her nails dug into her palms. "The goal." "The 5 million. He said it like it was obvious. "Our future, Stella. I was giving you space to focus." She let out a laugh that came out brittle, hollow. "Neil, Huxley gave that money to me, not you." She tilted her head, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. "Why are you so excited about this? I'm the one who spent Valentine's Day with a stranger. I'm the one who endured him, as you put it." His smile faltered for just a second. "Babe, come on. It's $5 million. Anyone would be excited." He reached for her hand. "Besides, I spent Valentine's Day alone. I had reservations at the best restaurant in Chicago. Took me a week to get a table, and I sat there by myself." How tragic. The words dripped with something she didn't bother hiding. Neil's brow furrowed. "Stella, sit down." She pointed at the bed. "Let me explain something to you." He sat, still smiling, like this was a game he was confident he'd win. She remained standing. "You pimped me out, Neil. You literally handed me over to another man for money. And now you're sitting here asking where the cash is? That's not—" "I didn't take it, Neil." The color drained from his face. "What?" "I returned the money." She crossed her arms. "I'm not for sale, and I'm definitely not going to let you profit from selling me." His expression shifted, confusion morphing into something uglier. "So what? You gave yourself away for free?" The words landed like a slap. Her palm connected with his face before she even realized she'd moved. The sound cracked through the room. Neil's head snapped to the side. When he looked back at her, his cheek was already turning red. "Don't you ever speak to me like that again." Her voice shook, but not from weakness. Fire raced through her bloodstream. "You pushed me into his arms. You sold me. And you have the nerve to act like I owe you something." A knock at the door. Debbie's voice floated through. "Kids, everything okay in there?" "Stella, honey, I made an appointment at the bridal shop. We need to leave soon." Stella grabbed her bag from the bed and yanked the door open. She didn't look back. Neil sat frozen on the mattress, one hand pressed to his burning cheek. The bridal boutique smelled like gardenias and crushed dreams. Stella stood in the center of the showroom, surrounded by white. White dresses, white flowers, white everything. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, turning everything cold and clinical. Her mother floated from rack to rack, running her fingers over lace and tulle like she was touching heaven. Helen appeared at Stella's side, voice low. "What happened back there? Something's wrong." Stella said nothing. Her throat was too tight. "Stella." Helen gripped her elbow. "Did you fall for him? The billionaire you spent Valentine's Day with? The one built like an aircraft carrier?" A laugh escaped her, sharp and broken. "Helen, tell me the truth." Stella's teeth sank into her lower lip. Pressure built behind her eyes. "I need to call off this wedding." Helen went still. "I don't love Neil." The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. "I'm not even sure I like him anymore." Helen clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Then she lowered it slowly. "That's the smartest thing you've said in months." Stella's gaze drifted to her mother, who was now holding up a beaded bodice to the light, practically glowing with joy. Look at her. Her only daughter, marrying into the Ashford family, rich, respectable, everything she ever wanted for me. Helen made a face. Then let her marry Neil. You shouldn't have to. It's not that simple. Stella's voice cracked. She's sick, Helen. The MS. The doctor said stress makes it worse. If I break off the engagement now, you'll stress yourself into an early grave instead? Helen grabbed her hand, turning her wrist over. Her thumb brushed across a small white patch near Stella's pulse point. Look, a new one, right there. Stella pulled her hand back. That's not... It is, Helen's voice softened. Your body's keeping score, Stell, even if you won't. She sank onto the velvet settee, head falling into her hands. The venue's booked. Invitations went out last week. Neil's already moved half his stuff into my closet. So what? Helen sat beside her. That man cheated on you. Once a cheater, always a cheater. You know that. Debbie's voice cut through from across the room. She was closer now, and from the look on her face she'd heard the last part. Girls. She approached slowly, her smile tight. Marriage isn't easy. It's a partnership, and there's something women need to accept. She paused like she was choosing her words carefully. Every man strays. If we ended relationships over that, there wouldn't be a single marriage left on earth. Stella rose to her feet. Mom, are you serious right now? Debbie reached out, gripping her daughter's arm. Balance your head and your heart, sweetheart. Otherwise you'll end up alone. Her gaze dropped briefly to Stella's hands, her neck, the places where the vitiligo liked to bloom. Neil isn't perfect, but neither are you. The words hit like a blade between the ribs. Stella knew exactly what her mother meant. She'd known since she was 14, when Debbie started buying her long-sleeved shirts and full-length pants, when she stopped letting Stella wear swimsuits to pool parties, when she started saying things like, boys won't understand, and it's better if you cover up. Debbie held up a gown, long sleeves, high neck, not an inch of skin showing below the collarbone. This one. Her smile was back, bright and brittle. You'll look beautiful in this, sweetheart. Stella stared at the dress, at her mother, at the life being stitched together around her, seam by suffocating seam. And for the first time, she wondered if she was strong enough to tear it all apart. Across the city, Fabio appeared in Conan Huxley's doorway with an expression that looked like someone had rearranged his face, eyebrows climbing toward his hairline, mouth twisting sideways, hands spreading wide in complete helplessness. Boss, there's someone here to see you, and he's insistent. He tugged at his collar, shifted his weight, tugged again. Red Ferrari, boss. Conan lifted his head from the computer screen he'd been staring at blankly since morning, the notification still glowing in his mind. Your transfer has been returned. 4 words that had hollowed out his chest. Something cold and patient settled behind his ribs at the mention of that car, and he leaned back in his chair. Send him up. Neil walked through the door 3 minutes later with the swagger of a man who had never been truly afraid, removing his sunglasses with theatrical flourish and sliding them onto his head like he was stepping onto a yacht deck. Mr. Huxley, I believe we had an arrangement. He settled into the chair across from the desk. 5 million, if I recall, I've come to collect. Our wedding is next week, and your generous offer would be life-changing for a young couple. Conan watched the way Neil's eyes darted around the room, cataloguing the art, the view, the square footage, putting a price tag on everything he saw, just like he'd done with her. My fiancée Stella asked me to come handle the business side, Neil continued, voice climbing. She's looking at wedding gowns right now. You know how girls are, dresses and jewelry and honeymoons. They can't get enough. The lie hung in the air like smoke from a gun, and something cracked open inside Conan's chest. What spilled out wasn't pain, but rage, pure and clean, and clarifying. He rose from his chair with the deliberate patience of a predator, unfolding from stillness, walked around the desk and stopped to look down at the man who had sold the only woman he'd ever wanted. Then his hand closed around Neil's throat. Neil's hands flew up, clawing at Conan's fingers as his face went from red to purple, and Conan lifted him from the chair like he weighed nothing, designer loafers dangling uselessly. Fabio, the checkbook. Fabio scrambled to retrieve the leather-bound book, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste. Turn around, Neil complied, gasping, spinning, and Conan pressed the checkbook flat against his spine to sign before grabbing his collar and spinning him back, holding up the check between two fingers. $5 million. Every cent goes to her. Her mother's medical bills, her future, not a single dollar on yourself. His nostrils flared. If I find out you spent any of this on cars or watches, I will make you regret the day your father didn't pull out. Neil's hands trembled as he snatched the check. Thank you, Mr. Huxley. Good deal. Conan's fist connected with his nose before the sentence finished, the crack echoing off the walls as Neil crumpled to the floor with blood streaming through his fingers. Dan, remove him! Dan grabbed Neil by the collar and dragged him toward the door, pausing at the threshold. That was just the trailer. Make one wrong move with that money, and you'll catch the full movie real soon. The door slammed shut, and Fabio stood frozen by the window with his face twisted in confusion, scratching his head, opening his mouth, closing it, scratching again. Boss, why did you give that piece of garbage $5 million? The words came out strained. Why didn't you just tell Miss Stella what he really is? Conan walked to the window and pressed his palm against the cold glass, watching the snow blur the skyline. There's a difference, Fabio, between knocking on the right door and kicking it down. Fabio repeated the words under his breath, lips moving silently while he tried to find where the meaning lived, still mumbling when he left, and the door clicked behind him. Conan stayed at the window with the snow falling, and somewhere across the city, Stella looking at wedding dresses for a man who had just tried to sell her twice, his hand curling into a fist against the glass, because for the first time in 3 years he didn't know what to do next. The wedding dress hung in the closet like a ghost, white satin, high neck, long sleeves that would hide every inch of the skin her mother found so shameful. Stella sat on the edge of her bed, while Helen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with that look only a sister could pull off. I don't get it, Helen said finally. Why can't you just tell Mom you're not going through with this? Stella's fingers twisted in her lap. You saw how she was at the bridal shop. She's been planning this wedding in her head since I was 5 years old. The perfect daughter marrying into the perfect family. Her voice dropped. When I was little, I learned that if I got her approval, I got her love. I know it's messed up, Helen. I know. But it's like something carved into your bones. You can't just unlearn it overnight. Helen pushed off the doorframe and sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You're not that little girl anymore, Stell. You don't have to keep bending yourself into shapes that hurt just to make her happy. I know. Stella looked at the dress again. But she's sick, and I'm terrified that if I break her heart, her body will break too. It's like I'm trapped between guilt and survival, and I don't know which one wins. Helen followed her gaze to the closet and let out a dry laugh. God, that dress. It's like whoever designed it didn't know where to stop covering things up. She tilted her head, squinting. Seriously? Who wears something like that? A 19th century ghost? Stella almost smiled, but the doorbell cut through the moment like a blade. Debbie's voice rang out from the living room, bright and delighted. Neil! What a wonderful surprise! Helen's expression soured instantly. Speaking of things that should stay buried, Neil appeared in Stella's doorway a minute later, all white teeth and expensive cologne, looking like a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He kissed her cheek, a quick, performative brush of lips, and grinned. Helen's eyes narrowed. What happened to your nose? Looks like someone rearranged your face. Stella looked closer. A purple bruise spread across the bridge of Neil's nose. Neil, your nose is bruised. Neil waved it off. It's nothing. Walked into a door. Helen snorted but said nothing. Babe, I've got a surprise for you. We're celebrating our belated Valentine's Day tonight. He winked. Get dressed. Something nice. I went all out. Stella's stomach churned with unease. Neil, I'm really not in the mood for... Come on. He was already backing toward the living room. I'll keep your mum company while you get ready. She's dying to tell me about the flower arrangements. Through the thin walls, Stella could hear her mother's delighted laughter mixing with Neil's smooth compliments, and something inside her tightened like a wire about to snap. Helen raised an eyebrow. So, what's the plan? I'm going to tell him everything tonight. Stella stood, reaching for her coat. About Conan, about not wanting to marry him. Once he knows I was with someone else, he won't want me anymore anyway. A slow grin spread across Helen's face. There she is. Go get him, Tiger. The hotel lobby was decorated with the kind of expensive, refined taste that made Stella feel immediately out of place, every surface gleaming with the reminder that she didn't belong. Neil. She stopped walking, looking around with growing alarm. I thought we were just going to dinner. He took her hand and pulled her toward the elevators, that salesman's smile never faltering. You didn't think I'd let my future wife off with just a meal, did you? I booked us the penthouse suite, jacuzzi, champagne, the works. Her palms grew slick with sweat as they stepped into the elevator, and she told herself it would be fine, that she would tell him everything once they were alone, that this nightmare would be over before the night was through. The suite was obscene, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a bed the size of a small country, rose petals scattered across white sheets like drops of blood. Neil closed the door behind them, and before Stella could speak, his mouth was on hers. She turned her head, pressing her palms against his chest. Neil, stop. We need to talk. Talk later. His hand slid down her back. I've been waiting for this all week. No. She pushed harder, stepping back until she hit the edge of the bed. Sit down, please. This is important. Neil dropped onto the mattress with a theatrical sigh, loosening his tie. What is it now, babe? Another not tonight mood? He tilted his head, studying her with thinly veiled irritation. You know, you really need to work on this whole sex thing. You're a little uptight. You get what I'm saying, right? Stella's fingers curled at her sides, but she forced herself to stay calm. This wasn't about his insults anymore. This was about ending it. Neil, I was with Conan Huxley. Not just spending time with him. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I slept with him. 3 seconds of silence stretched between them like a held breath. Then Neil's face twisted into something ugly. That bastard, he forced you, didn't he? I'll kill him, I swear to God, No. Stella's voice came out stronger than she expected. He didn't force me. I wanted it. I wanted him. Neil stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, reaching for her hand. Okay, look, I get it. $5 million is a lot of motivation. He squeezed her fingers, and nausea rolled through her in waves at the casualness of his touch. You did what you had to do for us, for our future. It's not ideal, but I can forgive you. We can move past this. Her mouth fell open, disbelief warring with reality. Neil, I cheated on you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Couples go through rough patches. His smile was back, smooth and practiced. What matters is that we trust each other, that we're committed to making this work. And the best way to put this behind us? He reached up to stroke her shoulder. Is to reconnect, physically, emotionally. His voice dropped. I left something for you on the bed. Why don't you put it on while I take a quick shower? And when I come out, I'll show you what a real man feels like. He stood, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it onto the chair before heading toward the bathroom. At the door, he paused to wink at her. See you in 10 minutes, gorgeous. The bathroom door clicked shut. Stella stood frozen in the middle of the room, her thoughts scattering like dropped marbles as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't angry, he wasn't hurt. He was acting like she'd told him she'd gotten a parking ticket, not that she'd been intimate with another man. Her gaze drifted to the bed, where a black box sat nestled among the rose petals. She lifted the lid with numb fingers and found red lace staring back at her, lingerie that left nothing to the imagination, the kind of thing she'd never wear in a lifetime. She dropped the box like it burned. That's when she noticed Neil's jacket on the chair, and the corner of paper peeking out from the inside pocket. Later, she wouldn't be able to explain what made her reach for it. Instinct, maybe. Or the universe finally throwing her a bone. She pulled out the folded paper and opened it, and the world tilted sideways. A check. $5 million, signed by Conan Huxley. Her vision tunneled, edges going dark as understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. Neil had gone to Conan. Neil had asked for money. Neil had tried to collect payment for selling his own fiancée like livestock at an auction, and Conan had paid. Red tinged the edges of her vision as she stared at the signature, at the neat row of zeros, at the evidence of everything she'd refused to see for 4 years. The bathroom door opened, and Neil emerged in nothing but boxer shorts, a smug smile already forming on his face. "Ready for me, Stell?" Stella's palm connected with his face so hard her hand went numb. "What the hell?" Neil stumbled backward, clutching his cheek. "What's wrong with you?" She held up the check, her arm trembling with barely contained violence. "You went to him. You asked him for money." Her voice rose. "You tried to sell me twice, Neil. Twice. That money was ours." His composure cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "You slept with him. You earned it. This was the deal." "There was no deal." Pressure built in her chest like a scream fighting to escape. "I was never for sale. You pushed me into his arms because you saw dollar signs, and now you're standing here in your underwear telling me I earned it." Neil's eyes darted between her face and the check in her hand. "No, I don't believe this. He threatened you, didn't he?" His voice pitched higher. "He threatened to hurt me if you didn't cooperate?" Stella laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even her. "Not everything is about you, Neil. I wanted to be with him because he made me feel valued. He didn't manipulate me. He didn't make me feel invisible the way you have for 4 years." She began tearing the check into pieces, her fingers moving with vicious precision, and Neil lunged forward. "Stop! Stella, stop! That's 5 million. "I don't love you." The words ripped out of her like bullets. "I don't think I ever did. And this—" She threw the confetti of paper into his face, watching it scatter across his bare chest. "Just made my decision a whole lot easier. If you think I'm going to marry a man who tried to sell me to the highest bidder, you're even dumber than I thought." She yanked the ring off her finger and pressed it into his palm, closing his fingers around it. "We're done!" She grabbed her coat and her purse, moving toward the door with steps that felt like flying. "Stella, wait. We can talk about this. Goodbye, Neil." The door slammed behind her with the finality of a coffin lid. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that caught in her hair and melted against her cheeks like cold tears. Stella walked through the city without direction, her heels clicking against the wet pavement, her breath forming clouds in the frozen air. Tension drained from her shoulders with every step, muscles unclenching that she hadn't even realized she'd been holding tight. Lightness filled her, strange and unfamiliar, and she realized with a start that this was what freedom felt like. No more pretending, no more bending herself into shapes that hurt, no more smiling at a man who saw her as property instead of a person. She stopped at a crosswalk, watching the traffic lights blur through the snow, and laughed, a real laugh, full and bright and completely inappropriate for a woman who had just blown up her entire life. For the first time in years, she could breathe again. The next morning, Stella sat behind her desk at the shelter, with a case file open in front of her, her eyes moving between the paperwork and the woman across from her. Gwen, mid-30s, with red-rimmed eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking in her lap. "You'll be safe here, Gwen." Stella kept her voice steady. "I promise." "For how long?" Gwen's fingers twisted together. "The restraining order expired last week. Nobody cares what happens to me now. He's out there living his life like nothing happened, and I'm the one hiding." Her voice splintered. "I had to leave my home, my job, everything, and he just walks free." Stella's hand stilled on the file. "So, he faces no consequences?" "A restraining order isn't a consequence. It's a suggestion he's already ignoring." Gwen leaned forward, something raw surfacing in her gaze. "When the people who are supposed to protect you don't, you're the one who ends up paying. And if I could—" Her jaw worked. "I would make sure he never laid a hand on me, my children, or any other woman ever again." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But I'm too good a person for that, and I'm paying for it every single day." Stella's lungs seized as Conan's voice cut through her mind, unbidden. You learn to become strong enough to protect them from the outside world. And when you can't protect them anymore, you make sure the people responsible understand what that cost you. The realization landed heavy in her gut. Sometimes keeping the people you love safe meant someone had to stop being good. She reached across the desk and wrapped her fingers around Gwen's trembling hand. I'm extending your stay, you and your kids, as long as you need. Fresh tears spilled down Gwen's cheeks. Thank you. That evening, Stella walked out into the biting February wind, her thoughts knotted beyond untangling. The wedding was cancelled. Her mother had barely spoken to her in 2 days. Neil had called 17 times before she'd blocked his number. The 5th voicemail had crossed from pleading to threatening. And through all of it, one name kept rising to the surface. Conan Huxley. Her heart strained toward him, desperate to lose itself in arms that had made her feel safer than anywhere else. But her mind wouldn't stop whispering, reminding her exactly who he was. A man with shadows stitched into his edges, a man who extracted payment from those who wronged him, a man whose hands were anything but clean. She stopped at the crosswalk, pressing her palm flat against her breastbone where something had taken up permanent, aching residence. I can't be with him, she told herself. I can't. But even as the thought formed, she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. 3 days later, Stella stood on the front steps of her apartment building, watching Debbie Webster wait for a taxi with her suitcase clutched in one hand, and her face arranged into the cold, silent mask she wore whenever words failed to express her disappointment. Mom? Stella crossed her arms against the February chill. You're really going to leave without saying a single word to me? Debbie's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't turn around. 3 days of silence. That's your answer? Finally, Debbie pivoted, and the look in her eyes could have frozen the Chicago River solid. You're a foolish girl, Stella. You threw away a perfectly good future with both hands. Her voice trembled with barely suppressed fury. And the Ashfords, do you have any idea what they said to me? What kind of daughter did you raise? That's what Margaret Ashford asked me, right there in front of everyone, cancelling a wedding 3 days before the ceremony, the humiliation. Stella's nails dug crescents into her palms. So other people's opinions matter more than my happiness. Neil sold me for $5 million, Mom. He cheated on me. He left me in a stranger's car and drove away. What else was I supposed to do? Wait until he started hitting me like the women at my shelter. Debbie shrugged, a single dismissive lift of her shoulders. You chose to get in that car. Technically, you're the one who accepted the money. Fury burned hot behind Stella's ribs. Neil abandoned me there. He ran. You don't understand the story at all, do you? I understand plenty. Debbie's chin lifted. I understand that I spent 25 years trying to prepare you for a good life, and you've thrown it all away for... What? Some dangerous man who probably sees you as a toy? Something cracked open inside Stella's chest. Not breaking, but releasing. Years of words she'd swallowed, years of smiles she'd forced, years of making herself smaller and quieter and more acceptable. You want to know what you prepared me for? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. You criticized me for years. You made me feel ashamed of my own skin, like I was something that needed to be hidden. I learned to be compliant because that was the only way to earn your approval. She took a step forward, and her spine went rigid as steel. And I finally understand why I stayed with Neil for 4 years. Because you taught me that love meant suppressing myself, that being lovable meant being invisible, that if I was quiet enough and agreeable enough, maybe someone would finally find me worthy. Debbie's face went pale. Everything I did was for your own good. No. The word landed between them like a stone. You suppressed me. You never thought Dad was good enough either. Nothing was ever good enough for you. Stella drew a ragged breath. But Conan, that man looked at me with all my flaws, all my spots, everything I've spent my whole life hiding, and he made me feel like a star that shines brighter because of the imperfections, not despite them. I was perfect to him exactly as I am. The words echoed in the cold air, and something shifted behind Stella's eyes. With all my flaws, exactly as I am. If he wants me with my flaws, she murmured, almost to herself, why can't I accept him with his? The realization hit her like lightning through clear sky, sudden, blinding, undeniable. She'd been holding him at arm's length because of his darkness, his shadows, the parts of him that didn't fit into a neat, acceptable box. But he'd never asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. Debbie must have seen the change in her daughter's face, because her expression shifted from cold to alarmed. "Stella, don't! Don't you dare go to that man!" "I'm sorry, Mom." Stella stepped backward, a smile breaking across her face despite everything. "I love you, even like this, and I love him too. This time—" She took another step back, then another. "This time I'm not going to stay quiet. Stella, safe travels. Call me when you land." And then she was running. The snow was falling in thick, lazy flakes over the Huxley estate, coating the manicured hedges and iron gates in pristine white. Dan leaned against the Bentley with his arms crossed, watching the sky like it owed him money, while Fabio bounced from foot to foot in a futile attempt to generate warmth. "Dan." Fabio's breath puffed out in visible clouds. Boss's silence. It's not a good sign. It's that calm before the storm kind of quiet, you know what I mean? He rubbed his hands together vigorously. "Tomorrow's the girl's wedding, and trust me, every single day after that is going to make us miss Valentine's Day like it was Christmas morning. Unless we crash the ceremony and grab the girl, of course." Dan's gaze dropped to a snowflake that had landed on his palm. "No." Fabio stared at him, eyebrows climbing toward his hairline in that familiar expression of theatrical exasperation. "That's it? That's all you're giving me?" "No." "No to what exactly?" He spread his hands wide. "If you could be a little more specific, maybe we could actually have a real conversation here. He's not kidnapping the girl." "Why not?" Fabio's voice pitched higher with agitation. "Last month we crashed the Gotti's place when they were late on payment. Before that we hit Franco's club when he started dealing on our territory." He gestured wildly. "Crashing places is literally our hobby. Did you forget?" Dan watched another snowflake settle on his sleeve. "Not crashing the wedding." Fabio stepped closer, hands carving shapes in the air between them. "Because?" Dan didn't answer. He simply lifted his chin toward the iron gates at the end of the driveway. Fabio spun around, squinting through the falling snow, and then his jaw went slack. Stella Webster was walking toward the gate, her coat dusted with white, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her steps quick and determined. A grin spread slowly across Fabio's face, wide enough to split it in two. He turned back to Dan with something close to glee dancing in his eyes. "Dan, my friend, get your tuxedo ready." He clapped his hands together, bouncing on his heels again, this time from excitement rather than cold. "Looks like that wedding's going to be right here after all." The iron gates of the Huxley estate stood open, as if they'd been waiting for her. Stella stepped through and walked slowly toward the mansion, her boots crunching against fresh snow, while her pulse hammered so hard she could barely draw breath. The voice in her head wouldn't stop circling, relentless and sharp. "You've known him for 24 hours, Stella. 24 hours. What happened to your logic? What happened to every rational thought you've ever had?" She kept walking. 24 hours. Is that enough time to fall in love with someone? Her lips moved before she could stop them, words slipping out in a trembling whisper. "If all I want is to look into his eyes one more time, to breathe him in one more time, to feel his skin against mine just once more." She pressed a hand to her sternum where her heart threatened to break through bone. "If even the thought of seeing him nearly stops my heart, then yes, I'm in love." She reached the stone steps leading up to the front door and froze. What if he doesn't want you back? Her gaze lifted to the darkening sky, snowflakes drifting down to settle on her cheeks, her lashes, her parted lips. The cold kissed her skin, but she barely felt it. Every nerve in her body was focused on that door, on the man somewhere behind it, on the terrifying possibility that she'd come all this way only to be turned away. Then the door flew open. Conan emerged like a man possessed, sweatpants slung low on his hips, chest bare despite the February cold, feet naked against the frozen stone. He descended the stairs with deliberate steps, each one driving him closer until he stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the storm in his eyes, and the way he looked at her. Stella had never seen anyone look at her like that, not once in her entire life. His gaze held something raw and unguarded, adoration layered with understanding, protectiveness wound through with a love so fierce it nearly brought her to her knees. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out anyway. "I left Neil. The wedding is off. Everything is off, and now—" Her throat closed around the rest, and she had to swallow hard before continuing. "Now I'm standing here in the snow, terrified that you'll tell me I'm too late." Conan closed the remaining distance in a single stride and pulled her against him so hard the breath left her lungs. His arms wrapped around her like he meant to absorb her into his skin, his bare chest blazing hot against her cold cheek despite the winter air. She buried her face in the curve of his neck and breathed him in, amber and tobacco, the scent she'd memorized from the first moment he held her, and felt tears prick the backs of her eyes. But she had one more thing to say. She lifted her head, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I'm angry at you, Conan. That check you gave Neil. Do you have any idea how that made me feel? Like you bought me. Like I was a transaction." Pain flickered across his features. "I only wanted you to have a comfortable life. A happy life." His voice dropped lower. "Even if that life didn't include me." Before she could respond, his mouth found hers, hungry and desperate and impossibly tender all at once. The kiss burned through her like wildfire, consuming every doubt, every hesitation, every rational objection she'd been clinging to. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, she gripped the front of his sweatpants to steady herself. "I want you," she whispered, "but I'm also terrified to be with you. I feel like I know you completely and don't know you at all, and that scares me more than anything." Her breath hitched, something raw surfacing in her voice. "And yet, I couldn't stop myself from coming." Conan cradled her face in his palms, his thumbs tracing gentle arcs across her cheekbones. Snow caught in his dark hair, melting against the heat of his skin. "5 years ago," he said quietly, "I was going to propose. Valentine's Day. I had the ring, the restaurant, the whole ridiculous plan." His jaw worked. "She never made it to dinner. A reckless driver, drunk, ran a red light. She died before the ambulance arrived." Stella's breath caught. "The man who killed her got a slap on the wrist. His family had expensive lawyers." Something cold and terrible moved behind Conan's eyes. "So I made sure he understood exactly what he'd taken from me." Tears spilled down Stella's cheeks, hot against her frozen skin. She reached up to cup his face, mirroring his hold on hers, her fingers trembling as they traced the sharp line of his jaw. "I love you, Conan." Her voice cracked but held. "With all your darkness, with all your ghosts, every single part of you." He swept her off her feet before she could say another word, cradling her against his chest as he climbed the stairs through the falling snow. The door closed behind them with a soft, final click, shutting out the cold, shutting out the world, shutting in everything that mattered. Near the garage, hidden from view by the Bentley's sleek frame, Fabio sat perched on the hood with a half-eaten donut in his hand and an expression on his face like he'd just witnessed the final scene of the greatest romance ever filmed. Dan leaned against the driver's side door, cigarette dangling from his lips, smoke curling up into the winter air. And for once, his expression wasn't stone. Something almost warm had softened the hard lines of his face. When the mansion door clicked shut, Fabio turned to Dan with the devastated look of a man whose movie had been cut short just before the happy ending. "Dan," he gestured toward the house with the donut, You think our careers are going to change after today? Dan exhaled smoke. Yes. Fabio waited. And waited. Yes, what, Dan? He threw his hands up, sending powdered sugar scattering across the snow. Come on! Give me something to work with here. Yes, how? Yes, in what direction? Yes, meaning we're all gonna die? Or yes, meaning something actually good for once? Dan flicked ash off his cigarette, the ghost of a smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. Means we've got beautiful Valentine's days ahead of us. He pushed off the car and plucked the donut from Fabio's hand. And stop eating my donuts. 3 years had passed since that snowy evening. 3 years of learning each other's shadows and sharp edges. 3 years of building something neither of them had dared to hope for. And now, on another Valentine's Day morning, snow had just begun to fall when Fabio and Dan took their positions at the base of the mansion's front steps, breath fogging in the early morning cold. Fabio straightened his tie for the 3rd time, eyes fixed on the door. I told you that day, remember? I said our careers would change. He shook his head slowly. But I gotta admit, Dan, I didn't expect this much change. Dan popped a mint into his mouth. I'm not complaining. The door swung open, and Stella emerged, 5 months pregnant, radiant, one hand resting on her belly, and the other firmly gripping the fingers of a 2-year-old boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's bright eyes. Fabio! Little Alex released his mother's hand and launched himself off the top step with the fearless confidence of a child who had never once been dropped. Fabio caught him easily, swinging him up onto his hip. There's my guy. You ready for the car ride? Alex bounced excitedly. What song are we singing today? I was thinking Baby Shark, the extended remix, all 47 verses. Dan's expression flattened into something between disgust and resignation. Stella was halfway down the stairs when Conan appeared behind her, moving fast. In one smooth motion, he scooped her up, earning a startled yelp. Sweetheart? His voice carried equal parts exasperation and adoration. Didn't I tell you I'm carrying you down these stairs every morning until the baby comes? You're supposed to wait for me. Conan, I'm 5 months pregnant, not dying. I can walk. He ignored her entirely, descending the steps with his wife secure in his arms before settling her gently into the Bentley's back seat. He pressed a kiss to her lips, soft, lingering, then slid in beside her. Alex scrambled between them, already chattering about breakfast. Dan glanced at the rearview mirror. Boss, where to? Fabio twisted around from the passenger seat. Harbour House first or Huxley Law Firm? Dan's head dropped forward in weary defeat. Do you always have to add subtitles? Law firm, Conan said, one hand finding Stella's. Stella's helping me with some case files today. Actually, Stella squeezed his fingers. Dan, let's drop Alex at my mom's first. She's been dying to spend time with her grandson. The car pulled smoothly down the driveway, and Stella leaned into her husband's warmth, their son nestled between them, their future expanding with every mile. She loved this man, had loved him since those first impossible 24 hours, loved him more with every day of the 3 years that followed. The man who had once channeled his grief into vengeance had found a different path now. The law firm bearing his name didn't defend criminals, it prosecuted them. It fought for people who had no one else to fight for them. Because of her. Because she'd shown him there was another way. Conan turned to look at her, his eyes soft with something that still made her breath catch. Sweetheart, Alex should stay at your mother's tonight. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I hope you haven't forgotten what day this is. Stella leaned in and kissed him, slow and sweet. The day I first saw you, she murmured against his lips. My aircraft carrier shouldered love. His mouth curved. The moment I first saw you, and fell. He brushed a strand of hair from her face with impossible tenderness. My shining star. In the front seat, Fabio leaned toward Dan and dropped his voice to a whisper. Who would have thought we'd be spending Valentine's days like this? Dan said nothing, but he was smiling. And that's the end of Stella and Conan's story. Thank you for being here. Two people from completely different worlds who looked at each other and just knew. If this story made you feel something, please like and subscribe. Wishing you all a wonderful Valentine's Day. And if you're single, don't forget, you are the most important person in your own life. Spend that day doing something that makes your soul happy. Now, question time. Leave your answer below. Leaving Neil, obviously. But would you go to Conan? Yes or no? I really want to know what you'd do.